Thank you. Good afternoon. It is 3:02 here on October 7th for this special meeting of the MDUSD board. And we will begin with roll call. I'll start with Vice President Mason.
Here.
Ms. Durkee.
Here.
Ms. Cound.
Here.
Ms. Mail.
I'm here.
Okay, all 5 board members are here. I'll ask that each of you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to
the
the flag
Of the United States of America
and to
and to the republic
for
for which it stands, one nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. So we will move along to public comment. So the public may address the board regarding any item on this special board meeting agenda. These presentations are limited to 3 minutes each, or a total of 30 minutes for all speakers, or the 3-minute limit may be shortened. If there are multiple speakers on any one subject, the public comment may be moved to the end of the meeting. Speakers are not allowed to yield their time. From my understanding from staff, we have 21 speakers, and so we will extend the 30 minutes, but we will ask the speakers to confine their remarks to 2 minutes each. And in addition to the public comment that we're doing here via Zoom, that just a reminder, people may also email comments to boardcomments@mdusd.org. Those go to all of the board members and they become part of the public record as well. So with that, I will turn it over to staff and ask them to start with the first of our speakers, please.
All right, thank you. Our first speaker is Mrs. Lee. Mrs. Lee, you have 2 minutes. Your time will begin. Oh, she's still connecting.
And could we say who the next speaker is afterwards so that person can be prepared, please?
Yes. Our next speaker will be Ms. Jill Maganito, and I've already notified her.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing Miss Lee any longer. We may have lost her. Let's bring in Miss Maganito. Ms. Maganito, please unmute. You are first to speak, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm a teacher at College Park and also a former virologist, so one who actually studied viruses before being a teacher. And I want to make sure that we're actually paying attention to the ever-evolving knowledge of how COVID works. So right now they have concluded that it is also surface as well as aerosol. So any safety measures that would be in real life learning, we want to keep in mind that being in a room full of students for long periods of time would be very detrimental if they did have COVID. So one analogy I like to use for people who don't understand science is think of it like cigarette smoke. If you're standing next to a smoker, you're most likely getting that secondhand smoke. If you're a few feet away, you might smell it, but not get a big hit. And so really, even if we all wore masks, you're still gonna get hit by it if we're in one shared space for a long period of time, which would increase the amount of virus load that you would be getting. And so while the masks are like an air purifier, you still have bits that could, become concentrated and therefore could eventually penetrate said protection. So, you know, a casual whiff may not do much in a smoke situation, but then over time, when we are sharing a classroom, we would actually be exposed to it more likely. And with hybrid learning, as a high school teacher, I would be exposed to all of the students within the whole week. So hypothetically, if I were to get the virus from like period 5, let's say, and so I got it, and then eventually I'll incubate it and potentially spread it out more, I'm spending a long period of time within their, within the classroom and within their space that I would be able to spread it to all of my students eventually. And so, you know, having any kind of hybrid learning would be detrimental in terms of a virus standpoint, because regardless, like I'm seeing all my students, they will all be exposed to each other if only half of them go in and half of them don't, and so on. And so I think it's not a good idea to do hybrid learning until we are actually ready to go, you know, fully in life in general.
Ms. Maganito, thank you. Your time has expired. I will release you from the meeting. Up next is Martha. Marta is still connecting to our audio. Next after Marta will be Sally Anderson.
Maybe we can let in like 3 speakers at a time and see. I see what Brian. Maybe we can let in like 3 or 4 speakers at a time, and then whoever's connected, we can call on that person to go as first.
Will do.
Thank you.
Martha, you may unmute. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
We've lost Martha.
We've lost Marta. We'll try Stacy Christensen, followed by Felix Esposito.
Stacy, if you're there, you may unmute, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, it looks like Stacy has left. Felix, if you would like to unmute. Your 2 minutes will begin once you speak. Hey, Felix, please unmute. Felix.
Yeah, hi.
There we go. Thank you. Your 2 minutes will begin when you start. Hey, Mr. Esposito, will you be speaking?
Um, I was just pretty much on this to try to get some more information regarding kind of the plans for the Mount Dallas School District, kind of its plans for reopening for I have a son that's in Northgate. He's a junior in Northgate, and we have a second grader and a kindergartner at Woodside.
Did you have a comment that you wanted to make for the board?
No, I was just trying to see. I just wanted to get more information. Just I'm one of those parents that kind of am thinking that it should be a good idea for the kids to kind of go back to school. And although my wife and I are trying to work our schedules out to do the social distance learning, be there with the kids at home, but I feel like it's definitely a good time to start getting the kids back into school. So I just wanted to hear what you guys had to say, and I guess in the meeting.
Okay, sir, perhaps you would prefer to look at the live stream link as opposed to this particular link is for comments only.
Okay, then sure, I'll do that. And then I guess can I still listen in on it?
Of course.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
So as promised, we knew we'd be working a few kinks out as we transition to doing Zoom and having public comments as part of that. So as folks, if they call in and they'll be muted, and then when they're told to unmute, that's when they'll begin their comments. And for anyone who was on and might have gotten kicked off, they can try to log back in, and if needed, I'm certainly happy to do public comments at the end as well if we had some people get lost and had technical difficulties here at the beginning. But I believe the way we're proceeding is allowing 3 or 4 people into the meeting at once. They'll be muted, and then they'll move to unmute when it's their turn to, and they may need to enable that as well on their computer when it is their turn to speak. They might just need to hit unmute on their computer as well.
All right.
Who do we have as the next speaker?
Looks like he has dropped off. We do have Ms. Foster now entering, followed by Mr. Ortiz Garcia. And then Yasmin Ayala. Ms. Foster, you may unmute and begin your comments. You have 2 minutes. Okay. I think it seems we have some confusion on this link.
Okay.
Should we explain again for people who do just want to listen in, the live stream link, it's not directly on the agenda, right? It's on if you go to the website, click Board of Education, and then board meeting agendas and recordings. And from there is the place that I'm aware of, the link to the live broadcast for people to be able to watch and listen. Is that correct?
That is correct. All right.
How many people do we have in the waiting room?
We have 16 at this point.
Okay. But let's try a couple more. Then if we need to, we can have everyone come in and make sure they understand that if they want to make a comment, that's how they would do this. And if they want to just view how they can do that as well. And if we need to, we can have additional comments at the end of the meeting. Who do we have as our scheduled speaker?
So we have a Ms. Gerald Walker. If you would like to unmute, you may begin your public comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to get in. I was just coming to chat for the meeting. Sorry.
No problem. So how about, could I suggest we let everyone in from the waiting room, and we can ask them to use the chat if they do actually want to make a comment, and then we could recognize those people.
Okay.
Tweak the system for next time.
I wonder if people are clicking from the agenda or from another location.
Okay. Yeah, this link, I believe, is on the same page. I don't know that it's on the agenda. It was placed earlier. Let's see.
Okay. So I just put in the chat, hello. We could also do raising of hands. All right. So I'm going to, I see Cynthia Aguilar. So I think if we could unmute Cynthia and have her make a comment, please.
Okay, can you guys hear me? I hear a couple other voices. I'm not sure. Can you guys? Okay.
We got you.
Okay.
Please begin.
Okay, sorry, I hear several voices at once, so I wasn't sure if you could hear me. I think there's a delay, I'm sorry, in the sound. So good afternoon. I thank you for listening to me. I'm Cynthia Aguilar. It's my, sorry, there is a big delay. I keep hearing myself. I'm so sorry. This is my 20th year teaching in the district. And I just wanted to, sorry, I just keep hearing myself.
You would want to turn down your stream. If you're viewing the stream right now, you want to turn that down or turn it off.
Oh, I have two windows open. Thank you. Sorry, thank you. Let me make sure I shut the right one. Okay, how about now? Is that, oh no.
So
there, how about now? Does that work?
Yes, we were not.
Sorry, I had you on the other link. I didn't realize. I apologize. Thank you for as we figure this out. I am a teacher. I just wanted to just give you something to consider. I know that there's talk about going back. One of the concerns that I have going back is right now I teach second grade. I can do small groups. So on Zoom, I meet with my kids, you know, I do lots of small groups during the week. If I go back in person, I'm not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to get that extra help from me. We're not going to be able to be close together. And if they're back in the room, they're pretty much just going to be at their desk. Like it's not going to be it's going to be worse in my opinion than Zoom because we're not going to be able to move around. I'm not going to be able to go over and hand them things. I'm not going to be able to see. I have to stay far away from them. I can't see their work. Right now on Zoom, they can hold things up. So I know there's a big push. I know the socialization is important. I know that being online is very hard for a lot of these kiddos, but if we can't go back the way that we're supposed to be there, I don't understand going back early because I feel like it's really not going to be as good as it is on Zoom. They're going to get way less from me than I can give them now. So just something for you to think about. I'm sorry about my sound, but thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. I will now ask you to leave the meeting and you can continue live streaming. All right. Thank you. Kurt Erickson, if you would like to make a comment, you may unmute.
No, thank you. I would not like to make a comment.
Okay, then I would ask you to go ahead and watch via the live stream as opposed to the Zoom link.
Is that where I found this link?
Yes, it will be there. It does indicate the live stream.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the three people I see from the comments right now are Sazakats, Katie, and Michelle, and then also Corey. And Zakats, I'll let you pronounce it, so apologies for butchering that. But I show you up next, and if you would like to unmute.
Hi, yeah, my name is Ameshe Sakach. I'm a high school student. I just have a lot of concerns about doing hybrid learning. I simply don't think it's the right time. Although many of myself and our peers are struggling during online school, I think it would be worse if we did hybrid learning. We would not get as much interaction with our teachers doing what seems to be the current plan of 2 days in school and 2 days online. It was a hassle to adjust to online, but I think many of us have settled into the routine and are starting to understand how this works. I personally feel very unsafe going back to school at this moment. I know that we would simply just not be able to get the same level of interaction and understanding. And the switching between it would be not only stressful and scary, and I feel unsafe doing so, it just doesn't seem like there's any real benefit to doing so. Although I enjoy in-person school and look forward to the day where we can safely go back to in-person school, I just don't think now's the time. And seeing as there is no real large benefits to doing so, I think that personally, I would prefer sticking to online school. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you for your comments. I will go ahead and release you.
Okay, I think you called me next.
Yes.
I figured we were just rolling with this. My name is Katie Cashiotis. I work at El Dorado Middle School. I also am the mother of a middle schooler at Pine Hollow and a 4th grader at Highlands. So I cover a wide range of this district in my household, but I wanted to talk about the feelings of my kids and the feelings of those kids and the logistics of what a day in the classroom would look like. If we had to line the kids up 6 feet apart and get them in a seating arrangement every single moment, and then have them walk in one by one 6 feet apart, furthest seat first, and then have them do that backwards, and then clean every surface and every single thing in between each class, we don't have enough time in the day. And we cannot keep our kids safe. And that is truly the core of what we do in our classroom. We risk our lives in case of an intruder. We put everything first when it comes to our students. And this is not putting them first. We can't do what we want to do in a classroom right now. Please, please, please listen to us and help us keep our kids safe in this time. We are giving them our all, but we can't do everything the way that we need to do it and keep everyone safe during this time with the protocols and the equipment that we have in place right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Katie. Michelle, Nicola, would you like to go next, please?
Hi, yeah, I'm also a teacher at El Dorado, so we're coming in strong today. I want to just acknowledge and appreciate the things that the first educator who spoke, I heard she was also studied viruses, and the high school student who spoke, listening to them, I believe that those are all the public comments that we would need to hear. That to me says it all. But I will also add that the one thing that has been very true this year is life has been disrupted. And to me, reopening schools is simply another disruption. As everybody has said, like, this is hard, there's no denying that. And I am aware that other schools in other states and other areas are doing it. But what do we tell our children and our students? Don't just follow the pack. So I strongly believe that we can't listen to pressures beyond what the people like our students and our teachers and everybody who works on a campus, from a janitor to already our food service staff that it's been stretched so thin during this whole time, to our bus drivers, everybody that it would take to make this happen. We don't need any more disruption. And we are settling into what distance learning is, and we are finding ways to make it work, because right now that is what is safest and what is best. So we need less disruption and opening schools, and we know what will happen. People will get sick and we will have to close them. And that is simply a disruption that we don't need. Our parents and families are just getting used to communicating with us in this way. And let's just settle into that and let that be what is safest and best for our communities until, like the high schooler student shared, we can go back the way that we're supposed to. And this is not the way that we're supposed to. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. I will now excuse you. Doug Novotny, if you would like to speak next.
Sure. Thank you. I'm not a staff at the school, I'm a parent, and my perspective is somewhat different. Almost every parent I speak to is very eager for schools to open, and it's certainly true for me. The question I think here is not just about taking care of staff, but of taking care of the community through the students, which I think is the school's main purpose. I looked up the statistics on Contra Costa's website this morning, and if I'm not mistaken, precisely 0 children have died of COVID. In fact, no one has died in the age of 30 and under. So really the issue here is not the safety for children, but the safety for staff, which is a real concern, I understand. I have it myself in my own work. But there are ways of protecting people that way. In fact, if staff are vulnerable or elderly or for whatever reason afraid, why not let them be remote and let children who wish to be, families who choose it freely, voluntarily, be at school and get all the benefits of school which they need. It's a tremendous hardship on families who cannot work and such. And furthermore, the top epidemiologist just this week put out a statement. The Great Barrington Declaration, you may have seen it, has well over 100,000 signatures already. Nobel laureates, the top epidemiologists from Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, et cetera, are explicitly recommending that all schools open, all the way up to universities. They're recognizing this is basic epidemiological practice, and contrary to what the politicians are doing, the science says open. So I hope you will review that and read it. It's a very thoughtful 30-minute video they have and a one-page declaration you could read that makes the argument that school should open immediately. And I know the county is allowing it. There's no reason now for the school not to follow the county's green light. That's my strong opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Green, Maxwell Green, would you like to unmute and go ahead and comment?
Yeah, sure. I'll make a quick comment. For one, I appreciate everybody's differing opinions. I tend to keep things pretty black and white. And I go by the motto, with any adversity that our family and community face, is adapt and overcome. We've been through hardships throughout our school system, and we'll continue to face more as the road moves forward. And we have a lot of smart people in charge, especially when they're leaving their political intentions out of their statements. But we could put some protocols in that are hybrid, especially for the little guys, kindergartners, first graders, second graders. Their minds are young, their brains are hardening. We got to get them in so it doesn't get worse and we don't face harder repercussions for those guys later down the road. So again, adapt and overcome. I think we have a lot of smart people in charge, and we could figure out something to make it work, to at least get the kids in class at least a little bit throughout the week and not put too much people in harm. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I'll go ahead and ask you to lead this portion of the meeting. And Mrs. Duenas, would you like to speak? Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have a very controversial opinion because I teach K-1 and am teaching from my classroom, and I have been since August. I feel that we need to bring the little ones back. Trying to teach the little ones remotely, yes, we're making it work. Yes, we're working hard and we're doing it, but I can't see when they're moving their manipulatives to see if they're moving them like I am. I can't help them if they're having trouble writing a letter. I can't see the work that they're doing in math on paper unless they're all trying to hold it up to their camera so that I can see it. I just feel that it is safer to bring the little ones back. They are the least vulnerable. And like another speaker spoke, the teachers that are in a high risk category or have health concerns, they can do the remote teaching, but I want to be back in my classroom with my kids. I'm sitting in an empty classroom right now and I hate it. I have to put on music or something because it's just not right. It doesn't feel organic, and I miss being with my kids, and I think it is safe to bring back the kids as long as the protocol set out by the state and the country give us. And I want to be back in my classroom with my students, however that's going to look.
Thank you for your comments. Kaylee Gale, would you like to comment? Please unmute.
Hi, I'm a high school student, and I believe that we shouldn't go back to school. We shouldn't have hybrid learning. We should have distance learning. I think that it's better if we stay with distance learning because even as little kids pose less of a risk of getting sick, they may transmit the virus to their family and put even more people at risk and spread the virus even more. And even if we want to help the little kids with their learning, you still have to socially distance and you're not really able to physically help them. So, and as a student, I don't really trust that everyone would follow the procedures and protocols to be safe. So it's more of a risk than we're not really going to gain anything more. It's just going to put more people at risk, and I don't think it's worth it to go to hybrid learning.
All right, thank you for your comments. And Sabina Shaw, if you would like to comment, please unmute. Okay. Joni Kirby, if you would like to unmute, you may be our next speaker. Okay. Let's see. Carmen Rios, would you, if you'd like to be our next speaker, please unmute. All right, Mr. Donanelli, you may be our next speaker if you would unmute. All right, we have a few more people to enter the waiting room. Mr. President, I don't know how you would like to proceed at this time. We are past our regular 30 minutes. We are running into these technical difficulties.
Can we try just letting everyone in? I posted in the chat and we'll post again. So if someone in the chat indicates they want to comment, we'll let them do so. I think there might be people in the chat who were attempting to view the live stream. And then my next suggestion is after we go through the group of people who are here, if any of them, if anyone's not able to comment, perhaps we could give an email address and those people we could contact during the course of the meeting and have them at the end of the meeting make a comment if they're having technical difficulties. Would that work?
That would be fine.
Okay, so I think we have Liz Stotsberry who would like to make a comment, and it looks like she's in and off mute. So Liz, if you would like to go ahead. Liz, if you would like to go ahead and make a comment, you may do so. And then next would be Chloe Park.
I can go?
Yes.
Hi. Hi. So I have noticed, you know, obviously people are anxious to get back. What I take offense to is the district's, you know, focus on students and teachers. There's a whole other staff behind this district. I am an office manager. I have a 9-month-old son. It's not just about the teachers and the students anymore. It is about my family, my family's family. It goes so far beyond just what happens to our kids, what happens to our teaching staff. There are so many more people involved on every campus. Hybrid learning is going to open up so much cross-contamination, so much cross-exposure. And then the most appalling part of this is you want to send the little ones back, the English learning communities that happen to be, you know, our racially different students who are more affected by COVID, and that is a factual data point. You want to send those students back to cohorts of learning, and it's not worth it to send our most vulnerable kids. I won't even go into special education students trying to follow distance learning or follow social distancing practices in a classroom. It's abhorrent to send our most at-risk people back first, our most at-risk kids. And we're not ready. And the acceptable amount of student staff death due to COVID is 0%. Until anyone can promise that, it is not worth it. We do not want to be the district that has a student or staff member death first in this state. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Chloe. And Nancy Klinkner, would you like to comment? Go ahead and unmute.
I didn't say I wanted to comment, but just was wanting to listen in and hear what folks have to say. There's a lot for all of us to consider, and I'm interested in the different perspectives.
So some folks might be on this stream, which is for commenting as opposed to the live stream. So the one other person that we had was, I believe, Liz, who had indicated she would like to make a comment in the chat. She was the only other person I saw. I do see her in the Zoom. So Dotesbury, if she's able to, can make a public comment.
Hi, sorry, that was actually my wife's account. I didn't realize that she had been the one to log in.
I think every parent who has used Zoom has probably experienced that recently, so no problem.
So my name's actually Corey Stotesbury. I'm a child psychiatrist and a parent of 2 kids in the district, and just wanted to represent the side of the science that what we are talking about here is that the kids who are doing distance learning are actively being harmed. And that's been very clearly stated through the American Academy of Pediatrics. Personally, I covered an adolescent psychiatric unit this past weekend, and 16 of the 17 kids that were there for suicidal thoughts or behaviors related to the stress that they had dealt with over the past 6 months. Another kid attempted suicide because his whole future plan had been based on wanting to be able to go to college and getting a college scholarship for basketball. And with basketball being postponed, potentially even canceled, he was so disappointed that the prospect of that future could happen that he tried to kill himself. And I think that that is relevant for teenagers, but far more so for developing children. And the estimation of what could happen to people should not be placed ahead of what is actively happening to kids. And they don't have a voice. There's no kids coming in to speak today. And so they don't have younger kids. We've had teenagers, but no younger kids coming in to say what they think about it. And I have yet to meet a kid under the age of 12 that doesn't want to go back. And so I hope that we can consider that.
Thank you for your comment. Tammy Webb had indicated you would like to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. I am the parent of a junior at College Park High School, and I also work for the Contra Costa County Office of Education. And I totally want to back up what I believe it was Chloe said earlier, and we really have to look at the big picture beyond the kids and the staff. We have to look at the families, everybody affected by this, and I really don't see how the schools would be able to meet all the protocols. I mean, her school has thousands and thousands of kids, and looking, I believe one of the instructors mentioned earlier from the middle school, the amount of time to wipe everything down, to walk the kids in, just all the protocols in place. I just don't see how we could manage that. And also agreeing with the comment made earlier about how the kids are finally just kind of settling into a rhythm. We've seen from the other states where they've opened up and then the case numbers go up. Are we ready to then close down the school and go back into the distance learning again? I think the back and forth would be much more detrimental. And my daughter, as teenagers are, is very active on social media, and the community of her own high school kind of has an app where they're all talking, and a lot of the kids have contracted it. So this notion that they're young, it's okay, it's kind of breeding this concern and nervousness within the community of the kids, where they're not comfortable with going back when they're hearing their peers have not been social distancing and are out and saying, I have it, my family has it. It's just making everyone very nervous. So I'm not for going back yet. But thank you for letting me make my comment.
Thank you. We have Tom Bushman who would like to comment. If you would unmute, you may begin your comment.
Yes, my name is Tom Bushman. I'm a parent of a special needs kid at Shadelands Elementary School. So I hadn't heard yet from a special needs parent. So my son, the Zoom, the distance learning is really not an education at all for him. He's not able to sit there and pay attention or to follow instructions. It's actually kind of a hard point for him right now, because if he goes to where the iPad is, he starts to cry because he doesn't want to be near it, because he doesn't understand. He doesn't have any verbal skills. He's had a lot of regression. So what we're talking about here, by not opening or even looking at possibly doing some special case needs, that we need to get our most vulnerable kids, our special needs kids. We're talking about lifetime of, speech and language skills, social skills that he may never develop because of this. So I really like the school board to take a look at that and really look into that as their decision-making process, because this pandemic can affect him for the rest of his life by that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. I have not had anyone else comment that they were interested in making a comment. We do have Claudia Guivenart in the room. Were you interested in making a public comment?
I think this is Kate Novani. I think I got skipped by accident. I was trying to figure out my technology. So I could, if we have time.
We do. If we have Kate and then Claudia, you can indicate after Kate if you did want to make a comment. And those are the only ones that I see. I think then we can transition to the rest of the meeting. But Kate, go ahead, please.
Hi there, I'm Kate Novani. I'm the mother of 2 middle school girls. The poor things, we just moved to Clayton in December, and so they just were starting up this new school year, totally fresh, so they know no one. Bad timing for us. Anyway, my husband spoke a little bit earlier. We're both psychologists, by the way, so we know something about mental health and mental health impacts from different decisions. And I'm here holding this great Barrington Declaration in my hand, that one-page document that he referred to that was just published by 3 of the leading epidemiologists in the world from the leading universities. And what they say is that those who are not vulnerable should immediately be allowed to resume life as normal. So not only is this to remedy the damaging physical and mental health impacts of these lockdown policies, which of course, as we know, relevant to this meeting, are keeping our students out of school, which is a grave injustice in my view. But also they say, according to Immunology 101, all populations will eventually reach herd immunity, which by the way is how the vulnerable, meaning the elderly in this case particularly, wind up best protected. Everybody else builds up their immunity, right, the thing gets managed. So that's even vaccines aside. So basically, I just want to kind of be clear my viewpoint that the lockdown is a big mistake and needs to be corrected now as soon as we can do it for everybody to proceed. And that goes for developmental, physical, and emotional long-term public health impacts from the lockdowns, but also to reach herd immunity so that those who are vulnerable can get protected. So the goal is not constantly to delay inevitably, right, the exposure that people are going to have. Let those that can develop immunity get immune, get everybody back in gear here, and keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any other speakers? And if we do, Ms. Jaranek, if we have anybody who had been hoping to speak and had technical difficulties, is there an email that they might email during the meeting and we could check before the end of the meeting to see if we missed anybody? Well, all right, I'll offer. So if anyone would like to email me, my email is lawrenceb@mdusd.org. So LAWRENCEB@mdusd.org. I will check the email before the end of this meeting. So if you could put as a subject, public comment, and I will look at those, and we'll try to have you invited back into the meeting to make a public comment before the end of the meeting. So with that, I want to say that I greatly appreciate the public comments. I think we had a wide spectrum of comments. I thought they are all very heartfelt, very intelligent comments, and I think that's precisely why we're having this meeting, is that there are different points of view on these issues. And when we talk about the health and safety of our students, our staff, the families in our community, there's nothing more important. And so we want to make sure that it's a well-informed discussion. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and move to our agenda. So the first part is the review of revision to administrative regulation AR 04420.4 charter school authorization. And this is an information item. And Dr. Clark, I know, was having some technical difficulties, but Dr. Clark, are you able to speak to this, or should we have perhaps Mr. Alvarado?
Seems like Dr. Clark is having some issues, so if you can hear me, I can go ahead and deal with this issue.
Yes,
so,
sir, Mr. Alvarado.
Yes, so this, we're bringing for information items, as an informational item to the board, a number of policies and regulations that apply to, with respect to charter schools. Our existing policies were passed in 2002 and have not been updated since then. There have been significant changes in the law, as you can imagine, in the last 20 years. So what we have is an effort to go ahead and update in terms of existing law and existing policies and best practices on this issue. What I'd like to do is go through each of these items in the agenda one by one, give you a summary of what changes we are recommending and why we're doing so, and then entertain any questions from the board as to that particular item. And we can go one by one and then that way address them all separately. The first item before you is Administrative Regulation AR 420.4, Charter School Authorization. Normally, an administrative regulation is not passed by the board, but it can be reviewed by the board to make sure that it complies with law and that it complies as well with existing board policies. So in this case, what we've done with this administrative regulation is we've simply updated the law as it pertains to a number of issues, including issues regarding admissions, school closure, governance, facilities, and particularly the application of the LCAP, or a local accountability plan, in charter school petitions. All of these have been passed since this administrative regulation was created back in 2002. What we have done is we've also removed language from this administrative regulation on the issue of renewal, revocations, as well as charter school oversight. And the reason we've done that is because we want to present to the board policies that deal directly with those issues and that also reflect current law. So with that, I can entertain any questions on this particular regulation and generally and give you an explanation if you want as to what additional changes we made to this regulation.
Okay, questions from the board?
I had a question, and I believe it was with this first one. They make reference in there to, in the AR about they must do fingerprinting, they must follow the regular hiring practices. Who's that reported to? Is it reported to us or just to the leaders of the charter school?
So one of the regulations that we have, or actually one of the policies, has to do with charter school oversight. And so what that would do is, now, by the way, Mount Diablo Unified actually has authorized one charter school over which it has oversight responsibilities. So what this does is it essentially makes it so that it gives us clear policies on that issue. And so yes, normally what we would do is when there is the need to have oversight over a particular charter school, the policies would give our superintendent the ability to have a person designated as a charter school contact person and also in charge of oversight. That would mean that the charter schools would have to report and to comply with all existing regulations and laws, and that would be reported to that individual or to our superintendent, whoever is that he designates as the charter school oversight representative for the district.
I have a question.
Ms. Mayo?
Many of our policies and administrative regulations have legal references at the bottom of the document. I know most CSBA model policies have those as well. I didn't notice any with the original policy or with the proposed policy. So I just like some confirmation if those are recommended that they be added to the policy.
Normally they are added to the board policies themselves, although in this case we have an actually administrative regulation where we may or may not add that. Now we can go ahead and add that language. A lot of the references are of course to the education code as well as to a number of both opinions and from the courts and from our California Department of Education. You're right, the original regulations did not have any references, legal references. We can definitely look into that and add those as well for the boards to consider and to add them as part of the administrative regulation if the board so desires.
Looks like I'm the only one that's interested. Thank you.
I have a question as well. I think to your point though, Trustee Mayo, I think that those references are under the board policies. And are you saying they should also be under the administrative regulation?
We see them frequently on both. I don't know that we've established an exact protocol, but they are good information if they're not taking up any space or are difficult to add.
I would agree with that as well.
And just to on that point, the administrative regulations supplement or are actually based on the policy. The policy itself is what the board is dictating as our instructions. It's actually in the same form as it would be a statute, so to speak. And the policies are the implementation, actually the regulations are the implementation by staff of those policies. So yes, we can add both of them. The references, the legal references will be the same as those of the board policy itself.
Okay. I have another question. Were you finished, Trustee Mayo? Did you? Okay. In section number six, item number 6, when I look at the CSBA sample regulation versus what we have written here, there were 2 places that I saw something missing from ours, and I wasn't sure if those were omitted for a particular reason. So the first is item 6C, where it says the charter school safety plan shall be reviewed and updated by March 1st each year. And then the second was under number 10. There was a second paragraph under number 10 that says such procedures shall also include processes by which the charter school will notify the superintendent of a district and by which the charter school may be notified by the superintendent of a district when a student or former student of the charter school is expelled or subject to any of the circumstances specified in that ed code. So my question is just whether those two items were specifically omitted from our version for a particular reason.
No, they were not, and they do reflect current law as well. So we can add that as well. Normally, the issue of oversight entails a lot more than simply what is in the administrative regulation. And so we would entail approximately 60 different items that are required of charter schools. And we can also incorporate that as an exhibit if the board so wishes. But those would be what would be in the day-to-day operation by the oversight committee or by the oversight individual to oversee over the charter schools, including notification upon expulsion, and as well as a number of other issues as well that are on the day-to-day operation, complaints and so forth. We have not incorporated all of that language as part of the policy. Perhaps it would be, we can incorporate it as part of the exhibit. And again, we're talking about over 60 or 70 items over which the school would have to provide information in certain circumstances to the district as part of the oversight process.
Any other questions on this item?
Yeah, I just have a comment that I think I submitted it as a question. And I don't know if it would belong in the policy or the AR, but I wonder, since we have a policy on equity, if we might want to pull some language from that just to show it, because the AR actually does talk a little bit about, I guess driving values. And so since that is one that clearly is part of Mount Auburn Unified, then is it legitimate or appropriate for us to indicate that for charter schools that they would need to address equity or show how they're addressing equity? And I didn't come up with this, I offered to come up with specific language, and I certainly can do that. But I just actually kind of, for the benefit of other board members, wanted to put that out there and get people's thoughts on it.
So yes, the charter schools have the same obligations with respect to the issues of equity, as well as non-discrimination, non-discrimination statements that are the same as Mount Auburn Unified School District, and that language can be put in explicitly as part of the administrative regulation as a requirement for them to follow and it is in fact a legal requirement for the charters to have.
I think that's a great idea, Trustee Turkey. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Any other questions on this particular item? Okay, Mr. Alvarado, did you want to move along to the next one, please?
We can, yes. So the next
I'm sorry. I just thought of one more question.
Ms. Count?
All right. Yes. So along similar lines to what Trustee Jerky was just saying, I'm aware that at times districts add into the AR requirements around assurances that the school will provide appropriate services for English language learners and students with disabilities. So that is something that we could add in here as well.
Yes, and that's actually added as well as part of the actual board policy. It does have a requirement for an addition of that language, including English learners, as well as English language and other subgroups.
So it's in the board policy, but not in the AR, is what you're saying.
Right, but it can be also explicit as part of the AR.
Thank you.
And now I think we can move along to the next item, Mr. Alvarado.
Right, so the next item is item 4.2, the charter school authorization. This is actually the board policy itself. As far as the board policy, what we have done is, and what we had in the past is a general statement, essentially saying that the district will follow the law, and that we'll work with the charter schools in ensuring that they comply with all the requirements. What we have done is actually incorporate a specific language with respect to the actual process in which they are to bring charter school petitions. This includes requirements as to the timelines for board action, ground for approvals and denials, as well as additional school closure requirements. And we've incorporated a number of other items as well that are current law. One of the items that I want to point out, which is actually something that was passed earlier this year, and that is slightly different from what we had in the past, is 2 additional grounds for denials that apply to new charter petitions, but do not apply to petitions for renewal. So one of them is a ground for denial. These are summary denial grounds that states that a charter school may be denied if it is demonstrably unlikely to serve the interest of the entire school community in which it is proposed to locate. And it includes an analysis of a fiscal impact of the proposed school. Another item is item 8, whether the district is positioned to absorb the fiscal impact of the proposed charter school. And again, there are some additional sub-requirements, and these can apply when the district has, for example, a negative rating with the county in terms of its budget and so forth. I do want to emphasize that both of these additional requirements, or new requirements, or rather new grounds for denial that became effective this year, only apply as to new petitions, and they do not apply as to renewal petitions, such as the one that the board will be deciding in a few weeks. So that is the main highlight when it comes to the board policy. But in addition to that, of course, we made additional changes to reflect existing law and to basically lay out the process by which the manner of approval of the petition, and some basic language as to charter school oversight, as well as the specific grounds for denial of the petition of a new petition, and putting them down in policy form so that it becomes clear for any potential new applications that may be submitted to the district.
Okay. Board questions or comments? And again, this is for info, so board members do have the opportunity before we would take action on this to follow up and send emails to Dr. Clark and staff regarding these. All right. Hearing none. How about if we move to the next one, please, Mr. Alvarado?
Sure. The next item is item 4.3, revision of board policy. This has to do with board oversight. Now, when we originally passed this policy back in 2002, the issue of whether the new charter schools would be subject to the district's own special education processes, its own SELPA, or whether they would be able to form their own SELPA. That was a new issue at the time, and it was unresolved. It has since been completely resolved, and nowadays school districts maintain their own SELPA, of course, as their own LEA, but charter schools can also go ahead and apply to different SELPAs, including El Dorado County and other SELPAs that function as a overseer for special education for charter schools. So there is no need for us to have that language specifically in the board policy with respect to SELPAs. Most of those issues are resolved through a memorandum of understanding. So what we do have, though, is a need for language with respect to school oversight. And again, we do have oversight responsibilities already over one particular charter school. We wanted to make sure that we have language in place that authorizes the district, number one, to work directly with the charter school in obtaining information as part of the oversight process, as well as to go ahead and conduct the oversight process through the superintendent or superintendent's designee as part of that. So that is what this board policy intends to do. By way of summary, what we essentially have done is incorporated existing language reflecting the law when it comes to charter school performance, the provision of district services, material revisions, as well as incorporating language required for school closures in the event that the charter school is closed as a result of either because of that school itself closes on its own accord or because it is closed as a matter of law. So, so again, we do have a charter school that we need to have oversight over, and this would provide us guidance as well as policies in that regard.
Board questions or comments on this item?
I would just like to point out that this one has quite a lengthy section in regards to legal references at the end of the document that are being added. And I appreciate seeing the breadth of those in this particular policy.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mayo. Other board questions or comments? We've certainly come a long way since 2002. So, all right. Mr. Alvarado, would you like to move along to 4.4, which is the review of proposed board policy BP 0420.42 on the charter school renewal?
Yes. So this is a brand new board policy, and it's a subset of an existing board policy, and it deals directly with the issue of renewal. In this case, of course, we would directly set forth the policy of the district when it comes to renewal. And again, it is a reflection of existing law, dealing in specifically with a number of items, including the timing of which the decision and the manner and the process in which the board is to review policies or review charter school renewal petitions, such as the one that we have in a couple of weeks. The need for staff findings and recommendations to be posted a number of days before that a decision is made by the board on the issue. And again, new grounds for denial to the economic impact, failure to serve interests of the community, which do not apply in the event of renewal, and that's made specific in this policy. And issues regarding performance. Now, renewals typically are based on performance indicators, in addition to other criteria to determine whether to renew a school. They are divided up into high performing nowadays, low performing, and middle performing, and the amount of time or the manner in which they are reviewed differs for each of those schools, depending on where they fall in that spectrum. We expect to provide additional information on this particular item in the future, given that there is a renewal petition pending before the board. But for now, what we have is a summary of the law as it pertains to renewal petitions that is being presented to you as a board policy or as a prospective board policy.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Mayo.
So we have 3 charter schools within our borders that are not authorized by Mount Diablo School District. They are authorized by other levels of school district or school governance. I don't see in these policies a clear explanation of what their process is should the renewal come before us and we deny the renewal.
And that issue is not 100% clear even to practitioners in the area. There was a change in the law earlier this year, AB 1505, that now requires charter schools that were originally granted by the State Board of Education following a denial by the district to come to us, to the district. In the past, they would go back to whoever it is that authorized them. And so if the state authorized them, they would go back to the state. That's not the case anymore. There is a question as to that intermediate level of appellate review, so to speak, whether they would be required following a denial by the district to go to the county and then to the state, or whether they can go directly to the state. And that issue, I think, is still open. But we do know, and the board policies reflect, that charter schools that were authorized by the state, at the very least, have to come before us as part of the renewal process before they go back to the state or the county. So that is the last sentence of the first paragraph, which says that the board shall consider renewal petitions only of charter schools originally authorized by the board itself or by the State Board of Education on appeal after initial denial by the board. And that is the law as we understand it right now. It's still open as to what their appellate remedies may be should the board deny appeal or deny the petition.
So we are not required to include their appeal process in our board policies?
We are not required to do that because that is set by law. And again, there's still an open issue as to what exactly that process is. We are required to state what charter schools are subject to review by the board, by our board, as opposed to what their appellate remedies may or may not be.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I'm not sure if it's for Dr. Clark or Mr. Alvarado, so I'll just go ahead and ask it. When we get an original petition for charter school, our staff will go over it and review the curriculum and the needs of the students and the financial piece and bring it to us to weigh in our decision. And I noticed in the renewal, there's several levels. You can renew it for 5 to 7 years, 5 years, 2 years, based on some of those criteria. So before we're asked to look at that renewal, will we have our own staff look at the dashboard and their growth and performance, or we just take their word for how they say they're doing?
I'll let Mr. Alvarado address that, and then if I need to, I'll address it as well.
So as part of the renewal process, there is a requirement by law that staff produce a report along with its own recommendations at least 15 days before the decision by the board. So as part of the staff report, that means a review of the petition itself to ensure that it complies with all of the requirements under law, including a review of the educational program, as well as the financial aspect, as well as the compliance with special education and other issues. So yes, the staff needs to review all of these, and it is impacting the process of doing so. And then we'll issue a report where it makes recommendations to the board one way or the other based on the law. There should also be a summary of the law and what that is for the board to review as well. And then the charter school may have the right to respond to that as part of the process during the last hearing. On the decision hearing, they are entitled to equal time to respond to any comments or any recommendations by staff. So yes, there is a process, and we are going through that in this instance.
Thank you.
So just to clarify on that, then, if October 26th is the date that we have Rocketship scheduled, is that correct? So that would mean 26 minus 15. So October 11th, which is a Sunday. So by October 11th, we would need to have published staff recommendations. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. For at least 15 days, unless otherwise agreed to by the district and the charter school. And that may be extended somewhat, but there is a limit of time as to how that can be extended.
Great. Other board questions or comments? Okay. How about if we move along to the next item then, please, Mr. Alvarado?
The last item is this charter school revocation process, and this is again a restatement of the law. As part of the oversight process over the charter school by the district, there may come a time where, for example, if there is an immediate danger to students, where the charter schools, those that are at least under the oversight of the Mount Diablo Unified School District, may be subject to revocation from our part. Now there is a process that needs to be followed. Typically, there isn't a time point by which they can remedy, and then there's a determination by the board whether the remedy is in fact effective or not. So what this policy does is put into a law, so to speak, or create direct policies for us on this issue. And this is just a restatement of the law on the process by which the Mount Diablo Unified School District may move to revoke the charter of a charter school that has been authorized by our district.
Okay. Questions, Ms. Count?
Yeah, so this particular one is quite straightforward, but I'm realizing there's one piece out of all of the policies that we're looking at today that I feel like is missing, unless I've just missed where it's posted here. The other recommendation, I think, from CSBA was to have an exhibit for charter school oversight, and that's the E0420.41. That explains requirements for charter schools, such as the governance following the Brown Act, some of those operations to not be operated by a for-profit corporation, that are in accordance with the new law. Is that going to be proposed here, or did I miss it?
So those are the 50 or 60 items that I refer to as part of the oversight process that are typically subject of the oversight over charter schools, and we can definitely go ahead and gather those and propose them bring it to the board as an exhibit to the board policy. That would not be an exclusive exhibit, but it certainly would incorporate all of those issues that you raised, and that would be part of the day-to-day oversight over the charter schools that would be conducted by our district.
So it seems to me that it would be timely to make sure that we approve those before we are seeing any, taking any votes on charter schools, just to make sure that we, have all of the legal items in place, particularly because that has some very specific pieces of the operations required by the new law.
Right, and the exhibit would be an exhibit to the actual administrative regulation. So it does not need to be approved by the board, but certainly we can bring it to the board as an informational item as well, and bring it forth when we do bring these policies for board review and potential approval. The exhibit itself, again, it's not law, but it is an example of the many policies in that we will be following in conducting oversight over the charter schools.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So will we be reviewing and considering these for adoption at our October 10th meeting?
October 12th?
Excuse me, October 12th.
And now I will leave that issue to Dr. Clark, but I think that it should not be a problem in terms of bringing it forth at the next board meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we have them ready to go. So it's just a point of just loading them in and go ahead and bringing them forward for approval. So I believe we will be doing that.
Great, thank you. Other board questions or comments? All right, with that, so as Dr. Clark and Mr. Alvarado said, these will be coming back for action. If not at our next meeting, then on the October 26th meeting. And so with that, thank you, Mr. Alvarado, for walking us through and answering all the questions. Dr. Clark, I turn it over to you to introduce the final item regarding the reopening of schools.
Great. So so we're having a discussion this evening, and that was, one of the reasons why we wanted to go ahead and schedule this study session, because the reason why we're having it now is because of the change in our county tier, and so I'm going to go through a quick presentation, and then any sort of reopening plan or discussion around reopening, we have to take, into consideration our labor partners. And today I've asked Anita Johnson, the president of our Teachers Association, to also do a presentation as well, giving her views and her members' views on this very important topic as well. But I did, again, I just want to communicate to the public is that we are not making a recommendation this evening. We are not leaning one way or another. We are having an intelligent, fact-based conversation about these are things that we really need to consider as we begin, going down this path. So I just really want to, make that clear. So I'll try to be as brief as possible in going through this presentation. So if I could have next slide, please. So currently, 100% of our efforts have been towards distance learning. We have agreed upon daily instructional minutes. Our teachers are providing direct instruction, small group work. Students are doing independent practice. Teachers are providing feedback. And now we're starting to go through the process of grades, of progress reports, and parent conferences. Is distance learning, do we have enough in place to sustain this? So if we need to sustain distance learning over time, can we do that? And so as we're going through this process, we do want to continue to look inward at distance learning and to continue to improve as we go. And probably one of the biggest challenges is accountability and relationships. So how can teachers hold their students accountable for the materials, but then also how can teachers really establish relationships with their students? And so that whole accountability relationship back and forth is something that we're still working on and something that will continue to progress as we go forward. Next slide, please. So as we're starting to at least have the conversation about about reopening, we have to get input. So we did distribute a survey over the weekend, and we sent this survey out to parents. We sent it out to our high school students, and we also sent it out to staff. And all we were basically trying to do is, we're not asking for any year-long commitments. We're not asking anyone to sign any declarations. We just wanted to get general thoughts from individuals, because we know one thing we've learned from COVID and going through this pandemic is that views and information changes rapidly. So I know we did lots of surveys over summer, but we felt it was important to to do a survey now, just to get a general pulse of where people are and which direction we should head in as a district. Next slide, please. Now, the next 4 or 5 slides are basically this was adopted from a county checklist on safety measures. And what we have found is that many are concerned about the safety. And as we continue to have these conversations, safety is going to continue to come up. So there are county guidelines and county checklists that have been provided for us that we are well aware of and that we have shared with Cabinet, and that we are making plans for if and when we do welcome students back to our campuses. And so I'm not going to go through these. You guys are free to go through these on your own. This presentation, as well as my other 2 presentations, are all posted online. So any members of the public, any staff, trustees, students, whoever wants to look at them, they can go through these with the fine-tooth comb. Next slide, please. So that last slide was on symptoms and monitoring. This is on cleaning and disinfecting protocols. Next slide. Social distancing. So again, one of the still guidelines, even with the tier that we're in, still requires social distancing. And so here are social distancing guidelines. Next slide. We have general procedures. So these are things around meal services, around food, around transportation, things to that nature. So here we have our checklist for that. Next slide, please. And then also, of course, communication and signage. So there is requirements for for signs to be posted and for information to be posted throughout our sites. And this is a checklist to ensure that happens. Next slide. And then again, training and communication. So this talks about what the requirements are for training. Next slide. So as we look at reopening considerations, so of course, we have been and we continue to follow Contra Costa County, work with the Contra Costa County Health Department. So I'm on weekly calls with all the superintendents in the county, and the health department is on each of these calls, and the health department has a very a very robust website that offers all sorts of guidance and recommendations and facts and information regarding COVID. So we were in the purple tier a few weeks ago, and we have now been moved into the red tier, and I'm predicting that around October 12th or 13th, that is once, because when you're in the purple tier and then you move to red, you have to stay in the red tier for 2 weeks before before schools got the green light for opening. So right around 12 or 13, October 12th or 13th is when I'm predicting that schools in Contra Costa County will be eligible to start the phase of reopening. Now the highlight at the bottom is if we start the reopening process while we're in the red tier, and for some reason, because of an increase in cases or whatnot, the county goes back to purple, we don't have to shut down and go through the process all over again. We actually just continue on. So I just wanted to make that footnote. Next slide, please. Now, some of the things that we have to consider as we're beginning to talk about reopening is what type of testing are we going to do? So if there's students or their staff members displaying symptoms, they should go and get tested at their, through their health plan, or there's also, free service, free testing services that are available in different events throughout the county. So there is free testing available. I shared that at our last meeting, and of course, we would continue to advertise and promote these free testing opportunities. Then the other type of testing is surveillance testing. So this is when you test when there's not necessarily signs, but it's just, we're gonna test everyone every week, every month, every 2 months. So again, this just helps no matter what we're testing. And so that is called surveillance testing. So it's important that as we look at this, is as a district, do we want to be involved in surveillance testing, or do we just want to require testing when someone's displaying symptoms? Of course, there's a cost to all of this, and so if we are going to test all of our staffs and all of our students, then we just have to know that there is a related cost to that. And I know that in time, there are many, either low-cost tests that are more expensive and things of that nature. But again, a lot of these things are on the developing stage of testing. And then the other piece is contact tracing. So if there is an active case, then how, as a district or as a school site, do we do contact tracing, through letters, phone calls, emails, things of that nature. And then if someone does have symptoms, or if someone has tested positive, then, we need to follow quarantine guidelines and protocols. So, and I know this is ever changing. So there was a 14-day, guideline. And I've heard that it's changed to 10 days. And so, so that's something that as a district, we would want to spell out. We'd want to, do we wait until someone has a negative test before they can return? And of course, this would apply to both students and staff. Next slide. The other thing I want to just talk about is actually what is a stable cohort. So a stable cohort is when students remain with a group and adults, so it doesn't change. So you have, your 14 kids are going to stick with one adult, or the average class size, let's say, is 26, 28. So if we were doing a hybrid model, we'd have half of those kids coming in one day, the other half coming in the other. The kids and the adult would not change. So that is a stable cohort. Within there, you have very strict seating charts. So you want to make sure that students are sitting, in assigned seats. And so that if there is a case that happens, then we can do the contact tracing. We know who was in close proximity to either the student or the teacher or whatnot. But obviously, these are things that we'd have to work out. Then of course, there's discussions where you can't social distance, whether barriers would be used. And I know over the months, there's been back and forth about masks, but clearly the evidence is out there that if there was any sort of opening that everyone would be required to wear masks. Daily monitoring, there are agreements you can do with staff and families that that basically agree to do temperature checks and symptoms checks before entering into our facilities, and there would be some sort of documentation that would follow that. So whether it's self-monitoring or whether as a school employees are doing temperature checks as kids enter the campus or enter the classrooms, or how exactly would that look like? So those are things that we have to consider. Next slide, please. Then, of course, we'd have to look at enrollment. So, from our survey, we just have rough data, and again, that data is posted and it is public for all to see. But we can see basically there is a percentage of students who are saying we would like to remain in distance learning. There's a percentage of parents who want to remain in distance learning, and there's a percentage of staff that are eligible to stay in distance learning. So when that happens, we are going to have to rebuild our classes. And so I know I've been getting emails all week, and there's some people who are very upset that that we haven't moved quicker. But as I said on the first slide, we have been 100% committed to distance learning. And if we start looking at creating a hybrid system, then we just have to consider that it is going to it could potentially require kids to be in different classes, or for teachers to have different assignments. So for instance, if we had two kindergarten teachers at a site and they both turned out that they were had medical reasons why they couldn't return, we would have to bring in two other kindergarten teachers to serve those students at a particular site. So those are things that we have to take into consideration. And of course, master schedules with teaching assignments. I think classes that maybe only have one teacher, and if that teacher is not able to return, then who's going to pick up that slack? Or if there aren't enough students to fill that class, then what's that's going to happen? And then for those who are going to stay home, then what is the online platform going to look like in relation to the in-class materials compared with what's online? So those are things that, of course, that we would need to consider as we go forward. Next slide. So these are just some examples. These are not recommendations by any means, but these are just some examples what some of the other districts have done. So some have phased in special education students first, and then maybe English learners first. Some schools have phased in their TK to TK to 2 students. So like those students would come in for the first 2 weeks. And again, you learn, you adjust, you reevaluate, and then your 3rd and 5th graders come, and the same thing. You learn, you adjust, you reevaluate, you remain flexible, and then you will start moving into secondary. And so this is how some districts have done it. Also, some districts, and I know we had quite a bit of discussion in this district about what type of schedule. Is a AB, morning, afternoon schedule preferable? Is a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, with Wednesday being a distance learning or professional development day, no students on campus on that Wednesday? Or is it back to your traditional, Monday, Tuesday with, or a Wednesday, Thursday with Friday being off, or, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday with Wednesday being off? There's all sorts of, combinations that we as a district, once we decide to go down this road, we can agree on. And then there's also districts that have, even if you're doing hybrid 2 days a week, they've also made exceptions for their high need students to come additional days. So they may come for all 4 days instead of just the 2 days that they were assigned. So again, these are just some things that we would want to consider as going forward. Next slide, please. Of course, there would be disinfecting, classrooms, desks, offices, play areas, common spaces. I'm gonna keep this check here, all hands on deck, because this cannot be done by just one person. Even if we hired, 2 custodians at a site, there's no way that, 2 people can disinfect a whole school. So, whether it's our classified staff or certificated staff, we're going to need all hands on deck, no matter what, when we get to the point of reopening. This is not going to be something that can rest on the shoulders of just one classification of employee. We're going to need all hands on deck to really come forward. And then, of course, the training, safety, and best practices. Next slide, please. In the secondary, you would have, it would be real difficult to have a stable cohort. So you're not going to have, like a group of freshmen who have every single class together, because of course in high school there are electives, there are leveled classes, and so so there would have to be some extra precautions given for these unstable cohorts and our secondary class sizes. Those would other be things that that we would want to consider. Right now, there is training that is currently taking place with some of our sports teams. They are showing up at our sports fields after schools, and they've been doing this throughout summer, and some of them are still doing this in the fall. Because we've moved to a different tier, there's been questions about can students within these pods share equipment, and I'm making it doesn't need to be board approved or anything to that nature, but I did just want to bring this to the board that I would like to give our athletic directors the go ahead to put forward their plans to have students who are in those small pods of 12 to 14 athletes be able to share equipment. And there's a whole policy around that. Not a policy, but more of guidance that's come from CIF and NCS, things to that nature. And then also extracurricular activities, just, as we're doing reopening considerations, is there a way to allow students to participate in clubs and some of those hands-on, like, for example, we have academies on our sites, and, I met with the academy lead from one of the academies over at Mount Diablo High, where, students are in the, they're learning first aid skills and things like that. And there is a need for those students to come and work on some of the hands-on equipment that's out there. So as we're looking at reopening, maybe there's a way to kind of phase in some of the clubs and extracurricular activities. Next slide, please. I think another thing that we need to look at, just, as reopening consideration, is the social emotional needs of our students. And I think depending on who you ask, if we're asking our parents, there are some students that are really having a tough time with distance learning and not having that peer support. And then what about the academic needs of our students? How are they progressing through distance learning? And then also that peer and adult relationships that are so important for our students. So those are things that we have to take into consideration. With our employee groups, I talked about all hands on deck. We are not, the way school looked last February is not the way school is going to look in the near future. That's just, that's just not going to happen. And so we're going to have to look at new roles and expectations of people, because there may be some work that we just don't do anymore because it's just changed. We're going to clearly have to work on MOUs with all 6 of our employee groups, and and we're ready to to start those talks and to start working towards really defining those MOUs with all of our employee groups. But again, I'm really hoping for a collaborative effort, a partnership with our employee groups. We're all in this together. It's not the district verse. The only reason why we exist is for our students, and so we need to come together as adults and work collaboratively and respectfully, and professionally, so that we can come up with reasonable expectations and roles so that we can serve our students. And then we also just have to take into consideration the political climate. You know, we have, there's families and there's anxiety around this, right? And so depending on, you know, who we talk to, there's some individuals who are saying, you know, stay closed, it's not safe, wait for a vaccine, you know, it's not safe. And there's others who are just saying open immediately, they're doing it here, you know, look what they're doing down the road. So we have to really take into consideration that political climate. Next slide. This is what's going on in Contra Costa County. So Acalanes is having and like 4 of these districts are having board meetings tonight. So Acalanes is bringing in special education students on October 5th. So they've done that this week, and they're going to do phases until a full opening on January 5th. Antioch Unified School District tonight is holding a special meeting, and the superintendent there is going to be recommending that they reopen on January 29th. Liberty is recommending, they've already made this recommendation to the board, that they reopen on January 12th. Pittsburgh is recommending reopening on January 4th. San Ramon is trying currently to phase in special education students beginning October 27th, and then continuing to phase in until they have a full reopening on January 5th. And in West Contra Costa, their superintendent sent out a notice this last week, and he was explaining to their families that in order for them to consider reopening, they need to be in the yellow tier, all of their cities, because West Contra is similar to us, they span over different cities, and all of their cities need to be in the yellow tier for 21 days. And in the surrounding counties, so Alameda and Solano County, they want in those counties to meet the following conditions with 3% or lower, and less than 10 cases per 100,000 residents. Next slide. And then this was just I know this is hard to read, but I just wanted to put this in there, that this was just approved by the legislator last week, and this is about employers notifying employees when there's a case. And so, as I've been reading in the papers with some of the schools that have reopened, now a lot of it is coming around, well, this district is not being transparent with active cases, and this district has a dashboard, and so now notification has now come into the mix as well. Next slide, and I think that might be my last. So that is my last slide. So as you can see, trustees, that there are many things to consider. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch and either opening schools, but it's also not as simple as just saying we're not going to open for the remainder of the year. And so hopefully we can continue to have, like I said, respectful, intelligent, and professional conversations around this matter. So with that said, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Johnson, the president of Medea, to either say a few words, or I believe she has a presentation as well that she would like to share. And again, I'm so thankful that she agreed to come in solidarity and come and present to the board on behalf of her members. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Ms. Johnson.
You're on mute right now, Anita. Ms. Johnson, you're on mute. There we go. Now we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. And can we start my presentation? Can we display the slides? There we go. Okay. So I am Anita Johnson, president of Mount Diablo Education Association. I'm representing the non-management certificated employees in our district. And I thank Dr. Clark for inviting me to speak and giving me this opportunity. And he is absolutely correct. What we need to talk about, we need to start talking about, are the things that we need to consider. So then that's what I'm going to do in my presentation, is to just give you our point of view on what needs to be considered. Next slide, please. I first off want to just commend everybody for all the amazing work that everyone is doing. And first off with management, I know in their reports at previous board meetings, management has really talked about the amazing work that is going on in our district. And I just want to reiterate that. Teachers are doing amazing work and management is doing amazing work. Office managers, custodians, just everybody in the district is really pulling together and pulling through, and we're finding ways to make things work. Specifically with teachers, I wanted to talk about how impressed I am with everybody's ability to establish relationships with students. I know how hard that is to do when it's just online like this. And our teachers and our other staff members are managing to do that. And I think that that is just incredible. They're finding ways to connect with students and they're getting students engaged in learning and they're helping students cope. So just want to call everybody out for just amazing work. Next slide, please. And of course, there are challenging circumstances. There are just a couple that I want to mention to kind of get them in your frame of reference. And the first is our teachers who are working with students who are deaf and hard of hearing. And, just I cannot imagine how they do that live in person, but just how you teach somebody, just how to sign, over the internet. I mean, it's just incredibly difficult. Our speech pathologists who are trying to teach students, what they teach them, how to pronounce their R's and everything. And, when you're dealing with the internet and delays and microphone problems, just incredible that they are making progress with their students the way they are. And finally, with our English language development teachers and how they are trying to engage with students and parents. And, can you imagine trying to tell somebody to open a new window on their computer and press the third button in the fourth row when you don't speak the language that they speak and you can't point to anything? So, just a couple of just examples of just the really challenging circumstances that everybody is going through. Next slide, please. So we all want to return in person, provided that we can keep everyone safe. And I just want to make sure, just to remind everybody again and again, that when we increase the interactions between people, we are increasing the risk to other people, including the most vulnerable in our society. And so this picture here is my mom. Today is her 80th birthday. And so she is one of the vulnerable people. And so I always think about her and how I want this infection level to go down so that she and everybody can be safe. Next slide, please. But it's not a question of, are we going to reopen or not? It's a question of when and how. And what it's going to take to reopen safely is diligence, which is strict adherence to guidelines and protocols and metrics. It's going to take dedicated resources, and it's going to take open communication. Open communication is absolutely crucial. Plans and protocols and explicit metrics must be communicated and clarified and communicated again. And I commend Dr. Rubio and Dr. Clark for their efforts in this regard. I think our district is seeing some progress in open communication. And I think that we would be in a lot worse place right now if it weren't for their efforts. So I do commend them. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information from the survey that we just completed doing. We surveyed our members between September 29th and October 6th. We had 888 responses to our 73 questions, because this stuff is complicated. There are just so many dimensions to everything. And like one example of how complicated things are is this survey specifically addressed 17 different job titles, which we know those people are going to need like special considerations that we're going to need to bargain and discuss and plan for because of the uniqueness of their jobs. And even with that, there were 35 other members who wrote and said, I need special, you know, something here or there too. So just, it gets more and more complicated the more that we dig into this. So just 3 of the questions from our survey that I want to share with you. Next slide, please. So this is data on the high-risk members who would need accommodations and not be able to return in person. So we have 16% of this group that answered the survey that are in a high-risk group, and it would not be safe for them to come on campus in person. Then there are another 23% who have family members in their households that are immunocompromised or high-risk situations. So we're going to need to address their concerns as well. So there are 61% who would be able to return to their site if that becomes the plan. Next slide, please. So responsibility for caring for family members is another consideration. And this again is a picture of my mom with some of her great grandchildren, just to get a couple of smiles in this very, very serious topic. But we do have members who are doing their distance learning teaching while also caring for children of all different ages. And so they have reported 20% of them, actually 21%, say those children would need to go to school at the same time that they do. So when we start talking about 2 days on and 2 days off, we would have to coordinate. And some of these students go to school in our district and some of them don't. So it's a whole nother can of worms. There are though 65% who would have no family care responsibilities and would be able to return with no considerations to that issue. Next slide, please. So the last one that I wanted to share with you, the last data point, is the question that we ask is, do you plan to return to in-person instruction? So 41% are, yeah, that's their plan. 21%, no, you know, because these are probably the ones that are in high-risk situations. 1% do plan to retire or take a leave of absence. But then there are 33% that are undecided. And their decision really depends on what you guys decide and what you plan for and what you implement. Because, you know, it's going to depend on if they feel that it's safe and a good idea to come back. So, you know, that's what we're dealing with, is that members just don't quite know right now exactly what things are going to look like. And so they can't make a decision like this until we have more firm details. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the details that I wanted to talk about is, you know, what we are really stressing is that our expectation is that we will set up plans in which every child, every school, and every community will be safe and healthy. Next slide, please. And so what does that mean? It means that there's countywide access to free testing within 24 hours and results within 24 hours. Because the last thing that we need is somebody walking around on campus wondering if they've got the disease or not. We need to know, as soon as we suspect it, we need to know yes or no. And this is something that we're really looking for the county to provide some leadership and some resources on. Next slide, please. We do need to have fewer cases in every city and town within the district. And we know that there are variations in the rates of positive testing within the different cities and towns. And that's something that we have to be very sensitive to. Next slide, please. It's important when someone does test positive that everybody in the community be notified of that immediately. And this is where open communication is so important. We just need to know what the facts are. Next slide. We would expect to see 0 new reported cases in students, in their household members, and employees. And again, that's something that you could only do if everybody does have access to the free testing. Next slide, please. Countywide, we must see fewer new cases per day, lower test positivity rates, lower hospitalization rates, and 0 deaths. Next slide. Which means that the county would need to be in tier 4, which is the yellow or the minimal level. Next slide. And I believe that everybody expects that the district would adhere to the county's public health measures for reopening, but that all needs to be specified and written into procedures. Next slide, please. Students and staff should test negative for COVID-19 before anybody returns to on-campus instruction. Next slide. Cleaning and sanitizing protocols need to be defined and fully in place and followed 100% of the time. We're getting good practice now with distance learning as it's happening. Everybody is working hard to clean and sanitize. We're not quite at the 100% of the time rate, but I think progress is being made. Next slide, please. So we need clear protocols that everybody will observe physical distance, perform daily health screenings, and wear a mask. And again, we're getting practice with that now in our current phase. Next slide. It's also really important to have a plan and a place to isolate anyone who develops symptoms while they are at school. And so that is another of the considerations that needs to be worked out. And that has to be done at each of the different sites. Next slide, please. So to reopen safely, it's going to take diligence, dedicated resources, and open communication. I believe that we can get there. Like I said, it's a question, not a yes or no, but of when and how. And these are just some of the things that we will all need to be considering and working through. Next slide, please. Can't resist a plug for yes on Prop 15. You all know that. The audience needs to hear that. Prop 15 will generate over $18 million for our school district. So everyone please vote yes on Prop 15. And thank you all for your time.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for both of those presentations. I'm going to pause before I move to board discussion. Ms. Juranek and I both contacted the folks we heard from who were trying to get in the Zoom earlier to make comments and then had not been able to do so. And I know Ms. Juranek had reached out to all of them, but I don't know if we have any of them in the waiting room. Ms. Juranek, could you give us a quick update on that?
Yes, I have not had anybody yet be able to re-enter the waiting room. If they were kicked out, apparently that prevents them from coming back in. I have asked them to share with me if they have any comments, and I will email all the board and superintendent with those comments as soon as I receive them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that, and thank you for everyone's patience with that. So I will now open it up to board questions, comments, and discussion.
I'll start if that's okay. So I want to preface this by saying I don't know what the answer is. I'm not saying anything with the idea that a foregone conclusion about any of this. I appreciate, all the presentations, both from Dr. Clark and from Anita. Thank you both for doing that. As you both keep saying, there's a lot. There's so many layers and a lot to think about. But just one thing that kind of came into my mind as I was listening is it seems like before any final decision to open to any degree, somehow we need to help parents and students, but I think mostly, and obviously particularly high school students, to really get a good visual of what it's going to look like and be like. And to Dr. Clark's point is, school as we've known it is not in our near future. Clearly, we're just not going to be able to have that for a while. Hope we will someday. I believe we will. But so when I hear about, particularly teenagers and the mental stress and emotional stress, and they're missing their friends and missing school, my heart bleeds for them. I totally get that. But I think it'd be important, again, for the students that are old enough to understand this, to really understand what it's going to be like, because you know, sometimes I wonder if that for some students might even be worse, you know what I mean? Like and I don't know, I'm not here, like I said, I have no judgment about it, but I just think they should have a clear, you know, that you're going to be distant from everybody, you know, wearing a mask, you know, it's just the social life that which I, you know, I think obviously it's a huge part, particularly, you know, for, again, our older students, important part of the school experience for them is the socialization. And, you know, even the interaction with the teachers, you know, there's that, I just think sometimes we're not grasping that point. And that definitely needs to be a factor before anyone, you know, and as I think it was Dr. Clark said, you know, these people's feelings and opinions change quickly, you know, and change a lot. So as people are going through their own individual process, thinking about it, make sure they're really clear what it's going to look like. Because we have heard, you know, we heard students say in the public comment that, you know, they're fearful that not all students will adhere to the protocols that are required. Because it's going to be hard, you know. I mean, I don't think that's I think that's a realistic expectation. You know, just going to forget. I mean, as adults, I don't know. I know I have sometimes it's like, oh, forget, you know, what you're supposed to be doing. Forget to keep your distance. Forget those kinds of things. So I don't know what we collectively can do about it, but maybe, you know, there is some information that can kind of maybe paint the picture for students that this is, if you do go back, this is what it's going to be like, and not to have some unrealistic expectation. So that was just one new thought for me today.
Thank you, Ms. Durkee. And it looks like we do have one of our speakers from earlier who is back on. We have, I believe, actually, I won't hazard a guess. I will look to Ms. Juranek to tell us who we have, because it looks like we might potentially have a couple of people. But who do we have, Ms. Juranek?
We have Natalia Peltier.
Okay.
And then followed by Trevor Stearman.
Okay.
And then I did receive an email that I can read to you from one of our other members who was unable to enter.
Okay, great. How about if we'll have Natalia, then we'll have Trevor, and then we would have you read the email, please.
All right. Natalia, if you could please unmute.
Hello, I work for the county as well in health services. I have 4 children. So I have a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old. I love my children. I want the best education for my children. I even would get in trouble for not sending them to school when they had just sniffles. I had to meet with the truancy people, and I said, well, I'm not going to send them to school when they're sick. So I just feel like having them home is not giving them the best education, and that's something that I fought for forever. So it makes me really emotional because they're not getting the best education they should be getting. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Ms. Peltier. Mr. Stearman, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'm Trevor Stearman. I teach at El Dorado Middle School for about 19 years. I really appreciate the school, the community, worked really hard, dedicated myself to that community. And so far, distance learning, it's improved a lot from last spring. Just like engagement in any other class, you have kids that are doing great. You wonder how much they can excel much more if they're in the classroom. Then you have kids you're really worried about, calling home, interacting with their parents, trying to get them to show up to office hours, and it's disheartening. Then you have teachers who actually miss the kids, and I happen to be one of them. And I actually appreciate working with those children and feel disengaged. And if while we're waiting to get things going, I think one policy that would be great for the district is to have a mandatory camera on policy. I understand, I've heard the equity issues, I've heard people's concerns behind it. I know it's problematic, but that would automatically increase engagement. Now, as far as like going back to school, I personally want to. I haven't been part of the whole, you know, Facebook stuff. I haven't even been listening to my own union lately. I've been just head down trying to improve my instruction for the kids. Because you have to realize I have 200 students. Like if I was independent study, homeschool teacher, I'd have like 30 students. I have 200. It's been many hours last year and this year, and it's actually been great for me. I've improved my my skill set. My main skill set is with the kids. But my concern is seeing the slides that Dr. Clark presented. Wow. To implement that effectively and see what that looks like one of the board members asked, I would like to know also, because based on last spring, you treated your administration like they were, essential workers. And sometimes they didn't have protective equipment. They had no policies how they were going to pass out Chromebooks, how are they going to pass out books, how are they going to interact with the community. The schools weren't clean and they were kind of left hanging. That concerns me. I hope there's a lot better improvement in the leadership from last year. And as far as like going back into the classroom, we really have to make that clear and make that work. And I don't know how you're going to do it really. And the whole science, I mean, it's all debatable. Like the herd immunity stuff, that's all subjective. But we should focus on the objective, like a lot of things what the slide said, and see how we can actually practice and implement that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Jurnek, I believe we have, I think it's 2 emails. Would you be able to read those, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank
Our
you.
first email is from Sabina Shaw. Sabina writes, I am a teacher in the district. My students are successfully engaging in distance learning. We are building community, critically analyzing sources, justifying our opinions, writing essays, making videos, and more. It is not easy, and we're making it work. The majority of my students have asthma and other underlying conditions. Many live with grandparents or elders. How safe will it be to return in person? I don't want any of my students' family members to die this year because of something they unknowingly brought home from school. The White House staff has access to daily testing, and yet we are seeing the spread of COVID even there. How often will we be able to get tested? What will the community circle be like? And when we are sitting at our desks, hopefully 6 feet apart, because of the risk of being together? How will students feel at school wearing masks all day, still learning through computers because I can't go help them at their desks? Will this truly be in their best interest? Will we struggle with multi-inflammatory syndrome? Will we still feel that going back is worth it when the first staff member dies? What about when the second or third? How will we feel when students struggle with multi-inflammatory syndrome, when their grandparents or other caregivers get hospitalized? My students live in higher risk areas, and because of racial disparities associated with the disease and with our country, may be at risk for having more complications from the disease, as well as less access to health care. Please consider the risks associated with returning to in-person learning until the rate of COVID is lower. It's not worth the risk. Our second email is from Melissa Esposito. She writes, I am a mother of 3 MD-USD children, a junior, a second grader, and a kindergartner. I have been working as a primary COVID nurse since March at one of our local hospitals. I work 32 to 40 hours a week and homeschool 3 boys full-time at the same time. I appreciate every and all teachers for what they are doing this time. I understand it is not easy for them. As a mother of 3, I am trying my best to help my children and my teachers to make this the best possible learning experience. Yet almost 3 months in, some teachers, as well as some students, still don't know how to use all of the features on Zoom and Google Classrooms. I have changed my entire life to accommodate this current situation. I understand that times are scary right now, but just as the world continues to open, I feel that MD-USD also needs to open as soon as possible. MD-USD cannot have selective phobia to the pandemic. Our children's mental health is starting to take a toll on them, even with all the changes we have implemented in our household. And that completes the emails.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Jurnek, and thank you to our public. And so we heard from Ms. Durkee. Other board members?
I'll go. I think about this a lot. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to weigh. And I just want to assure, and I think I can speak for the whole board, when, as far as one of the speakers said, when we look at it, we're looking at every student, every family, every staff person, no matter what they do on campus, even volunteers on campus. We are concerned with everybody's health and safety. Like Ms. Durkee, I have no answers. I know my gut feeling is I don't want to really see us do anything until January, because with the break at Thanksgiving and the break at Christmas, there's a whole lot of opportunities for families that aren't being that careful to have interactions, and then they're going to be coming back and forth. And I guess in line with that, I would like to see if we can do some kind of outreach, some kind of, I don't know if it's a video, or maybe we work with DLAC to do, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but to do some kind of a public service announcement for the families that I see in the Bay Point community that continue to have large gatherings with no social distancing, no mask. They don't mean any harm by it, but they put everybody at risk when they continue to do that. So maybe if we could have some kind of a video that parents could look at, or some kind of outreach to say, you know, we need to do these things to look out for everybody, not just ourselves, to look out for our neighbors as well, to improve the health of the whole community. And I would just say that there are some, I won't go into a lot of detail, but some of the suggestions on both sides, I don't think are possible. You know, as far as testing, when you test negative for that point in time, and that's all that means. The next day, you could be positive. So having said that, that's my input. I will say, for anyone who's listening, starting this Saturday at the clinic at Riverview, there is free testing for anybody who wants it. You just show up and they'll be there. I believe it's 9 to 1 to do free testing. And if you're a family going there to get free testing, you can get a free flu shot at the same time. So, you know, I was just on a meeting yesterday. Thank you, Linda. I was just on a meeting yesterday with County Health, the local sheriffs, code enforcement. You know, being unincorporated out here, we are working with the county nonstop, trying to find ways to get over this so we can get back to some semblance. And I guess the last thing I say is I don't see, for me, but I can be swayed, maybe a opening of the doors and everybody comes back all at the same time and we're back to business as usual. I think it's going to be a phased in approach, bringing our most at-risk students, whether it be for at-risk of their health or at-risk of their education, returning first with every precaution being able to be taken. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. Ms. Mayo, Ms. Count?
All right, you're quiet there, Ms. Mason, Ms. Mayo. Okay. All right, let's see. First of all, I just want to say, you know, this is really tough. We're clearly hearing, you know, perspectives from the entire range of people's opinions and comfort levels and sense of safety, and as well as the whole range of how distance learning is currently going for students and families. And so to try to make the best decision we can for the whole district is a challenge. And I think it's a challenge for all of us, the surrounding districts as well. And so we want to take all of that information in and do the very best that we can. So I'm looking forward to seeing the other two presentations that are included here today as well. But based on what you've shown so far, a couple of thoughts. One is you talked about really one of the biggest challenges with distance learning being accountability and relationships. And that is something that I'm hearing a lot, whether it's the, you know, our very youngest children, or whether it's even our high school students. How are our teachers and staff able to build relationships with them? And how are our students able to build relationships with each other? So one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is even before the full hybrid model that a lot of the districts are looking at for January, I am particularly interested in the small group opportunities. The thing that I saw in San Ramon's presentation is what they called small group learning on campus. And the way they have it set up is 2:45 to 3:45, Tuesday through Friday. It's particularly for specialized groups, socialization and intervention. And it's voluntary participation by teachers and support staff. So I wonder if something like that would at least be a first step in addressing some of what we've heard tonight, whether it's, you know, the teacher who wants to be able to work with a particular group of students, whether it's for socialization, you know, things like an after-school club, or whether it's pulling a particular group that needs intervention and needs you know, academic or speech therapy in a particular way. If you have teachers, staff, and students that are all willing to do that, and we're saying no to them right now, you know, maybe this is the time to say, you know, how about that as a first step, and have all of the protocols in place for very, very small groups. So I'm particularly interested in kind of looking at that. And as well as you talked about, Dr. Clark, about the sports. I know that's something else that we've been hearing about, that our athletic teams have been able to do conditioning, but they've been asking for that next level of can we actually use a ball? And so what are the requirements around that? What is our ability to approve kind of the next step of that interaction for them as well? So those are kind of some of the key things as far as next steps. I think as far as the full hybrid piece, there are so many details that we need to figure out, right? And the biggest one for me is the testing. You know, is it available? Is it free? How quick are the results? And when will we get there to where we really feel like we can even know how much of our population actually has COVID? So I think that's a huge issue to be coordinating with the county. And then as far as the phase in as well, I would say that I'm very interested in what we're looking at in terms of special education, and I think that's an upcoming slide presentation that you have here as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Count. Ms. Mayo?
Ms. Cowan brought up the fact that there's a couple more presentations. Will we be seeing those? Did we jump the gun in providing feedback from the board? Should we have waited until after those presentations occurred?
Dr. Clark?
No, I think you know, the two remaining presentations are just sharing data. So it's just you're gonna see what you know, what some staff said, you're going to see what parents said, you're going to see what some students said. We also have some of our special education data. So once we finish these comments, I can go through that briefly, but I was more putting that out there just to be completely transparent in this process. And I don't want people to think that there's decisions being made behind closed doors or whatnot. And so I just wanted to put all that out in the open. And I'll go through those presentations very briefly when we're done with your comments.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. First, like everyone else, I want to acknowledge our administration and Medea and all of the labor groups who have spent untold hours in addressing the issues around the pandemic. We have not only spent hours at work with this, but you've also spent hours dreaming about the issues that we're facing. And we wake up in the middle of the night and write something down on a piece of paper because, is this important? Where do I go and look for information about it? And who has the best information? And as was said, there's a variety of opinions out there. And yes, I'm know that the board will work hard to make the best decision possible with the support from all of our community members. I must admit this afternoon when I was, earlier today, when I was looking at the presentation online, I too grabbed a calendar and counted 10 days out from all the holidays. And I started with Halloween because Halloween is a huge event in my community, and Carnoween at Pleasant Hill Elementary School is very well known. Yes, there won't be a Carnoween this year, but people are still going to be gathering on that particular night. If you look at that timeline, well, all of a sudden we're up against Thanksgiving, and then we're up against the Christmas holidays. So for me, the best date would seem to be, I'm not holding fast to this right now, would be around January 10th or January 12th. It's 10 to 14 days after the January 1st, which is New Year's, and perhaps by then there will be some sort of indicator how many people have been exposed and have come down with the illness between Christmas and New Year's. And so for me, that was not a revelation. I thought about it before, but I was looking at it a little more seriously at this point in time when I compared it to what other districts are doing. I am interested in seeing how we can bring back the special populations, and if there are employees that are willing to work with these students that are so much in need. And there are so many other factors that are critical in bringing that back. I even considered, instead of bringing back the elementary school program and then the middle school program and the high school program, why not start with one grade at each level? That's a different way of approaching it, but then you'd have an indicator at each level what the socialization impact might be. The other thing that I recall, and I would appreciate some background information, is I believe that the legislature adjourned without considering whether or not school districts would be held harmless for the decisions around reopening. And I don't know if other public agencies were held harmless or not in their legislative deliberations, but as we're moving forward, I hope the public understands we don't want to mourn with any family, whether it's the family of a student or it's the family of an employee. And so this is why we take this consideration so seriously. And please understand that it is a very difficult decision for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mayo. So my thoughts, starting with the fact that Ms. Durkee and I, are on a timeline where a month from now there will be the election. 2 months after that, we as board members, you're sworn in around December 10th. I don't know the exact date, but so we're looking at 2 months here as our remaining time on the board, 1 month until the election. I think that, provided that the rest of the board would like to have continued work on this prior to bringing in the new board, and I think we should certainly, after the election, allow the 2 new board members. We want to make sure their voices are heard and how they're representing our community. But I think Ms. Durkee and I are both certainly willing to continue to work on this up until the time we leave office in December, because I don't think it would serve anyone well to wait until December to continue this important work. I don't want to reiterate too many of the statements that other board members had made, but I would like to say, certainly in regards to sports, and this is something I have spoken to Dr. Clark, I really appreciate his approach to it, that I think we want to see what we can do there. And I think that a great deal of work has already happened and is continuing to happen to prepare for this reopening. So this meeting is not the start of the work, but it's rather a continuation of work that, tens of thousands of hours have gone into. And I think that, most of the people I talk to recognize that there are variations to this. And so I think that, frankly, we're certainly not saying the day we can, we're bringing every student back and we're opening the doors and pushing everybody in. And, we do certainly have to work with our bargaining units and our other constituencies. And I appreciate greatly Ms. Johnson being here and sharing her perspective on it. I think it's very encouraging to see that the majority of our teachers have indicated they would be open to being back in the classroom. And so I think that is a step in the right direction. We have to work because it is, one of our speakers mentioned earlier, it's not just teachers. We have to have secretaries and custodians and food workers and all the other staff and administration that's there to support our students. So I think we have to look at that as well. I think we have to find a balance, because as much as I would like to say, hey, we're going to wait until there's 0 deaths from COVID in a county of 1 million people, I don't think that's realistic. Also saying that we would have nobody in MDUSD among our 29,000 students and among our thousands of teachers and family members, no one testing positive. I don't think that's a realistic standard either to look at the return, but I do certainly agree on the need, and I think it's absolutely vital that we have consistent access to testing and fast turnaround on that, and that we operate with transparency around those things. And so, kind of for me, since the beginning, 2 of the groups that I've felt very strongly about, we do have teachers and staff and students who, because of health conditions or their own concerns and family members, have said, I am not comfortable being back on campus. And I think we need to be very respectful of that. And so in my mind, any teacher or staff member or student and student's family who says, I want to remain in distance learning through the end of this school year, at least, I think we need to do everything possible to honor that and provide that. I have zero intention of wanting to see us push people back in if they are not able to do so. The flip side is there are people who we have talked about numerous times who would greatly benefit from the support of being back in the classroom. And there are many teachers and staff members who want to do that. And I think we need to look at what are the ways we can do that. And I've also heard from families, especially of young children, who have concerns with the hybrid, in that having a student back in for a couple hours each day, or having a student back in 2 days a week, in some ways that would create more of a challenge for families to provide supervision and now deal with transportation and getting a child to and back from school without a full school day. And so, I continue to look at, do we start with smaller groups, but providing a full, close to a full school day and a full week for those students. And so that is one thing. I also think, as Trustee Cound mentioned, that, I think this is certainly worthy of exploration. We had looked at a model early on with the hybrid over the summer. My concern with the hybrid is when you account for the students who want to remain in distance learning, when you account for the families and students who really need to be back on campus, you already have those 2 groups, and then adding a third hybrid on top of that, and the logistical challenges, as Dr. Clark has pointed out, and some of the supports around that, and the strain that puts on families, on staff, on teachers, that is a concern of mine. And so, and instead of a structured hybrid model, do we look at instead returning small cohorts of students? Is it a less structured, but are we getting the students who really need it, getting them back in class as quickly as possible and as many of them as possible? And for other students, are we able to help provide some of the social supports, emotional supports, and just getting them back on classrooms in some form without a formalized hybrid model? For me, that's an open question and something I would like to see us continue to look at. I would like to see us in the next several meetings start to, I think the points are very well taken around the fact that we are coming into holiday season and the cold and flu season, and we've been told for months that there's a possibility that this would be a time where we would see an uptick. And when I look at the other districts, as Dr. Clark laid those out, they certainly seem to be looking at that January timeframe for a return. And so my thought would be, we should look at some can we look at smaller groups before then, but for who we might have to make a return, that we would start to target that January timeframe, planning for that. And also, and you know, I think we need to be cognizant of, if you look at just in New York and Boston in just the past few days, both of them had returns to school that they're now pulling back, and the disruption caused by that. So I think we need to just be mindful of that, because I think what would be incredibly disruptive is saying, hey, we're going back, oh, we're back for a few days, and then we're pulling back out. And I think we also need to have a plan that provides for the possibility when students return that a student, that a staff member may test positive for COVID. And what is our threshold for when we would shut down a school, when we would shut down the district from in person? Because I think, you know, simply saying if anyone tests positive, just the sheer numbers of that, I think we would be setting ourselves up for failure in that instance. And so I think that's another part of the conversation and that we need to look at. So those are some of my thoughts, and I'll stop there. Any other board questions or comments at this point? Yes, Ms. Cowan.
Just some responses, because I agree with a lot of the things that you were just saying here, particularly looking at our students who are not being successful with distance learning right now. I think it would be helpful for us to have some data about our district. You know, how many students and where are the ones who, you know, distance learning is really not working for. You know, maybe we identify them by you know, grades, D's and F's, or attendance. They have not been attending, or they've been, you know, chronically absent. You know, who are those kids at what age groups, and what are some strategies that we can have to really meet the needs of those students? You know, whether is it a need of, you know, for internet? Is it a need of a particular special education services? You know, what is really, to pinpoint what is causing the problems there, and then can we direct solutions particularly for those students? And then, as you were saying, for students who distance learning is going okay, but obviously, you know, a lot of students are struggling in terms of the social emotional piece, and so, you know, can some kind of small group model you know, work for that, to be able to give students at least some social interactions? So I am concerned about what the hybrid model, how it works for secondary. I fully understand, you know, looking at TK through 2, you know, or 3, and that what that could look like and how it could be done. Although, you know, I would want parents to understand they may not still have their own child's teacher, because it really depends if that teacher is even able and willing to come back, you know, and so there could be a whole shuffling of, you know, who has whose teacher with that kind of a model. But for secondary, if students already have a set of classes for this year, you know, in high school, with all their different electives and leveled courses and all of that, I just don't see how you redo that whole master schedule based on which students and which teachers and which staff are willing and able to come back. How will we actually even still have the full master schedule of classes available? And will students be able to get the classes that they need? Would they have to move, you know, out of the classes that they have right now? And what does that mean? So to me, it feels a lot more disruptive to be looking at secondary right now. Yeah. And then I appreciate what you were saying too about the details of what this looks like. I think looking at some of the other districts and what they've been doing, I like some of the clear charts that I'm seeing. You know, there's a chart. Again, there's a couple of good charts in the San Ramon plan that I noticed that it's like a flow chart. You know, exactly what happens if you have COVID symptoms, you know, or you test positive, or, you know, they have each different scenario, what actions happen and what communication happens. And that can be posted on a wall, or, you know, it's in the return to school packet. And same thing for exactly what sanitation looks like, custodial, and ventilation. I know, Dr. Clark, in the presentation, you had a section on ventilation talking about the air filters at MERV 13, I'm not clear whether we've checked that box, whether your report meant that we have achieved that or that that would be a goal to achieve, have all of our filters been replaced with the MERV 13 filter, for example. So there is a way to do, just a one-pager chart to show kind of where we're at with that. And I feel like that might deal with some of the uncertainty here in the survey questions, whether it was Medea's survey or the district survey, where a lot of the people were in between with the I don't know answer, just because the details aren't there yet. And then the surveillance also was something mentioned in the presentation. And I wonder if water testing is something that we're looking at in terms of surveillance, and if that's feasible, to be able to test the water within our district, to be able to see if COVID is present there, to then be able to give us some indications as well.
Can I just add on to that a little bit? I think, I think we all understand, if we ask ourselves what's being lost for students, is just focusing on students, it's easy to understand the social emotional part. And that's why I was saying, to be thoughtful about how to help students understand what it would look like, if they did come back in any of these models that we're talking about, and so that they, also can manage their expectations around that. My heart breaks for students that are, really in serious mental health, crises. But I think there's a lot of layers to that, is what I'm trying to say. So there's that. But the other thing is the comments that we hear from parents, and not that I'm saying there's a lot of it, but, I just know my child's not getting the best education right now. So that, we all say, well, yes, of course, we know that because it's not the same quality because it's doing through Zoom. But I think I'd like to drill down a little bit on that. What do people really feel like, it's hard to break out the social interaction part of education. It's a big piece of it, but in terms of really, truly, what could be measured on performance, on tests and performance outcomes and all the data that we look at and how students are doing, what's not happening, and are there, if kids can't log on, that's an obvious answer. But in terms of the instruction that's going on and what's, if the kid that's there every day, is there still a sense that something is not happening? I guess I'm still bent towards trying to come up with creative solutions to address those issues until we can feel just more confident and safe that we're not putting people at risk, frankly, just as Anita talked about, as, people's families and all of that. So, I just keep hoping that we're going to keep working at creative ideas and those silver lining things that can happen. But we had to Ms. Count's point, we have to have a better sense of, what the data is, how many kids aren't turning on their video, how many kids, and we allow that, I understand why, but, how many kids are not showing up, but, and then, on the just standard test, how are kids performing? Parents have a unique perspective on their child is sitting there at home and the child's with them and they're hearing the kids, what they're voicing and their frustrations. But I think we need to get a little more scientific about it, is what I'm trying to say, so that that could help inform these different options in terms of next steps, because, maybe we stay with distance learning, but then like was suggested, do some in-person, maybe even optional, you can come in and meet with your teacher, in a distance learning environment once a week or once a month, or, some other ways to address some of these things. But we have to have a better handle on what's really lost right now. So.
Ms. Mayo or Ms. Mason? Okay.
I'm sorry, I was slow and
please.
I was just thinking as Ms. Durkee was talking, and pardon me for smiling, we're setting all these expectations, but it's what, 2.5, 3 months till January. So there's so little time in some respects. It's an eternity of time, and there's so little time. So just many challenges.
Absolutely. One thing I also just want to touch on is, I think Dr. Clark, members of the board have all articulated some of the groups that we want to look at that have had some of the biggest challenges. But I think this has been stated before, and we heard it from at least one speaker tonight, is that some of these are also the most physically at risk and might be especially vulnerable to, even though infection rates thankfully appear very, very low for children, that, medically fragile student populations, that, this is, again, not a one size fits all. I think we've indicated those are the groups we want to look at, not that all of those students would need to go back. And so again, I just anchor again on the thought that if someone is most comfortable remaining in distance learning, whether for the entirety of the school year, I think we need to provide that option. So that was just one other thing I want to add. So Dr. Clark, I know you mentioned you were going to go through the survey, and I know we're still doing analysis of that in the other presentation. One question I had just for you though before that is, if we are working on some type of January target timeline, would we be able to look at, do you feel we're in a position to look at groups that we could potentially return to the classrooms before then? Or what are you thinking in terms of a time frame?
Well, I mean, it really is a, it really is a loaded question, because, we have,
why we hired you.
Yeah. Well, we have a reopening plan. I mean, we can come up with, with the systems and the schedules and things of that nature, but there's just a lot of work that has to happen on the side. So again, I talked about, the roles and responsibilities of staff, and all of that's going to have to change. So all that's going to take time, to end up getting, two groups together to sit down and really negotiate this, and, the back and forth that, that negotiation brings, and, the research that's brought in. So it is going to take some time. I mean, in my head, I would like to, point at a January date as a target. However, if cases are going through the roof, then that's not going to be the case. If things are happening, if testing still hasn't been worked out. And so part of the reason why I put that presentation together is just to show how truly, difficult this whole thing is. And, and for one, I've been thinking about this nonstop since March, and I'm talking, there are no days off. I mean, this is every day, all day in my head. And so I've run through these scenarios, but I also know that once we start to let, and excuse the analogy, but once we start to let the horse out of the barn, so to speak, then there's a lot of moving parts. So let's just say that we targeted, let's just say there were 5 SDC kids at every school site who we wanted to bring back in some way. There's going to be a ripple effect with just bringing 5 students back. We have to go back and we have to work with, our CSEA members who, are instructional aides. We have to work with, Medea. There's, we have to work with our administrators. We have to then maybe even have IEP meetings for those kids. And so, so not that we're opposed to doing that work, and we're more than willing, and staff is all ready to do that. But do we want to go down these false starts, right? And just sort of exploring options. You can't set up a negotiating session, with 10 people, for 8 hours just to explore some possibilities, right? Like both sides need, we need tangible stuff. So I think, President Lawrence, to answer your question, if I go over the slides, I think I can show you kind of what we're talking about in terms of numbers, or in terms of at least groups of students, and I think I can do that. I can do that fairly quickly. But I would just like to say, that I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the picture of Anita's mom and family. I think sometimes that we see ourselves in each other. We just see them in our position, and to get to be able to see the big picture of individuals, I think is, you know, is something I find really rewarding. So next slide, please. So, so one thing that we did is we just put this together. It was a 7-question survey that went out to all employees, you know, parents, and high school students. And so again, it was just an opportunity to re-engage. So we didn't really ask the questions about, you know, how is distance learning going for you? What are you getting out of it? Or things like that. We just wanted to get a general number, because if we had a general number of like how many employees were going to require medical exemption, then we could start some of that behind the scenes planning. And same with students and same with parents. And so that was kind of part of the gist of us sending out this survey. But as we get closer to coming up with the plan, we would want to send something out much more binding, where we could really get some strong commitments from people either way. So let me quickly go over the employer responses somewhat. Next slide, please. So sorry about the you know, these were screenshots or whatnot. So we did the best we can. So this was, are you currently working on site or remotely? And so again, this is all staff, and we had about 2,100 staff members respond. And so you can see that about 53% of our staff are working at home, and about 40%, 39% are working at the school site. Next slide, please. And then from that, we're again, we're just kind of asking, you know, it's very difficult to say, okay, we're going to do an AM, PM model, we're going to do a Monday, Tuesday model without really knowing that. So I know that so many people need more information, but it's really hard to give at this time without really committing one way or another. So again, you see 68% of employees say that they would come back, and 29% said that they would be remotely, and 1% say that they're going to request a leave without pay or leave the district. And although these are all staff, it's still relatively very similar to what Ms. Johnson presented earlier. Next slide, please. So then this was a question that we broke down by we broke down by ethnicity of our employees, and it basically lays out from ethnicities how they answered those exact same questions. Next slide. And then this was, you know, again with the hybrid model. So we're putting it out there. You know, so we're asking. You know, I'm trying to just see learning model. So again, we have like 50%, 47% that said, you know, yes. Another 17% said no, and then again, you know, we have that group that's undecided until we kind of come up with an official recommendation of a direction that we want to head in. Next slide, please. And then again, this is that same data, but broken down by ethnicities. Next slide. And so what this asks is what information would be most valuable to you as an employee. And so, you know, we have, you know, we have COVID information from the county level. Let me get my glasses on. We have how the cohorts will be scheduled. You know, again, more information about symptoms, physical distancing, health and hygiene. Probably the highest one that it looks like is specific details regarding the school day and the school schedule. Okay, next slide. And then again, it breaks it down by ethnicities. Oh, what this asked is if you aren't coming back, or if you're concerned about coming back, what are some of those things that you have concerned about? And so health and safety definitely was above you know, everything on this. So childcare issues are very low. Happy with remote learning is low. And then there's some other write-ins which, you know, we haven't been able to break all that data down, but we have lots of data on what people wrote in. Next slide. And so next slide, please. We then broke this down into our employee groups. And I just want to say one of our groups did not respond, and that's generally because we sent this out through email, and they really don't you know, work on computers regularly. But you can see the gold is CSEA, the pink is CST, blue is DMA, purple is Medea, and red is Medzpa. So again, are you working at home or remotely? You can see that information. Next slide. And then we ask if we're going to go into a distance learning, so you can see by employee group how it broke down. Next slide. And again, this is posted so everyone can go back and really break this down and look at this a lot closer. And then we're asking, how would you feel if we brought back some of our some of our students who need extra support, and so you can see how each employee group sort of responded to that. And I think, as you can see, of course, I mean, our employees are in this business to support kids and to help kids, but we understand that, some have some other circumstances that would, prevent them from answering yes in this. Next slide. And then this talks about the hybrid model, and would you be in favor of having students back in a hybrid model? And so then, of course, you can see the yes, you can see the, ones who want to remain, and then you can see the I'm not sure. And again, we won't get to that until we actually, have a model that we are bringing forward and presenting, which we have models, but it's just which one do we really want to stake our claim in and kind of go forward with. Next slide. And then we asked again, why? And as you can see, health and safety is real big, and of course that is that's completely understandable, and we get that. Next slide. And now student responses. Next slide. So this was just basically, and I know it says TK to 12, but we decided to get this to high school kids. So we had 2,100 high school kids respond. So, I think that is great. Especially, we sent this out on a Saturday, and I tell you, the responses were just rolling in on Saturday. So it's great that these kids are checking their emails on the weekend. So as you see, 56% of our high school students want to come back, and 43% are happy with distance learning. And we can dig a little deeper into that, but that is interesting. That is not what I would have thought. So next slide. And then we broke it down by grade level, so you can look at the different grades, and you can see, per grade. Again, this is I mean, basically the freshmen and the seniors are almost identical. So of course, the juniors, which is, typically oftentimes your most difficult year, those people who said they want to stick in distance learning, maybe it's because they're being successful in that tough junior year. I don't know, but anyway, interesting stuff. And I, encourage everyone to take a closer look. Next slide. And then we also asked them, if they, with our students, what were some of your concerns? So as you can see, just like the adults, health and safety is up there, and happy with distance learning is there too. And then the other, and I can tell you, it's centered around what the schedule would look like. Next slide. This again just breaks that same question down by grade level. And it seems like we have some very health conscious sophomores, so we're glad to see that. Next slide. And then we asked our students, what information would you like? And not surprising, our highest one is specific details regarding the day. So I know it was mentioned, by the trustees, by one of the trustees is what would it look like? And I think we need to be very transparent with our kids about what it would look like in a hybrid model. Next slide. And then we also broke that answer down by grade level. I don't have the keys right in front of me of what color each equals. I'm gonna assume red is freshman and green is senior. But again, that breaks it down by grade level. Next slide. And then we asked them what more information, what would be valuable information or a presentation that our students would like to see. And the majority is tell me about the school day. What's it going to look like? So I think that's something that we need to pay close attention to as we're moving forward. Next slide. And again, what information. And this just breaks it down again by grade level, and you can see that. Next slide. And then parent responses. Next slide. We asked our parents similar questions. We did send the survey out in English and Spanish, and this shows the responses. We had 8,300 parents respond, which is very good, I would say, in terms of those who respond to surveys. Next slide. And then this just breaks it down by student number, but the majority of our parents have one kid in our system. Next slide. So then here's grade levels. So it kind of peaks in the middle there, 4th, 5th grade, kindergarten, kind of dips down as they get a little older. Next slide. So then we asked them, this is basically what our parents say, is sending students back in person, or do they want to stick with distance learning? So, again, depending on how these surveys go, we're not going to make a decision purely on surveys, but I don't think that this has changed much from the surveys that were done in summer. I think it's very, very similar. So just something to keep in mind. Next slide. And then here we go again. So again, that health and safety is a big thing. So that's in something where we have to continue to educate and communicate. Next slide. And information that they would want, or present information that'd be valuable as a parent. Next slide. And what information would be most valuable to your students? So we're asking our parents, what do you think your students want to hear? And not surprising, they were still the schedule is a big concern. Next slide. Now these are our Spanish responses. Next slide. So again, these are our Spanish families who completed the survey. Next slide. Again, you can see the grade levels kind of plateaus there at 6th grade. Next slide. And very similar parents, I think it's almost close to identical. So next slide. And the data is the same. Next slide. And you can see the information that that this group of parents would like to see. Next slide. And again, it's a tie between the schedules and the the safety measures, hygiene, things of that nature. Next slide. That might be the last slide. So then if we could go to the next presentation quickly. So again, I know last year when some of the surveys were done, I had heard there were some concerns that the results weren't being shared and things of that nature. So we did just want to share that out. So this is information. This is basically our special education population. Next slide. And these are our groups that we're looking at. So preschool, transition age, resource, inclusion, special day, and then we have some home and hospital students. Next slide. And this is the breakdown of our kids. So when we're looking at our special education population, our largest population are students who are in regular ed classes, but they may just have a small learning disability, speech and language would fall into that. So we're looking at 41% of those students. And then as you see, our special day class students, there's 26% of those, but with many of the others, there's the percentages go a lot smaller. So let's just say we were looking at preschool, or let's say, we were looking at SDC as, it's 1,100 kids throughout the district, and again, if we go to our parent, if we go to that 64%, want to come back, 35% don't, then that even reduces these numbers even further. Next slide. And so, and then again, in these even within SDC, we have different levels. So, so which level would come back is, something like extensive needs. Maybe we look at the ones with extensive needs, or maybe, we're looking at moderate or mild. But those would be the recommendations that we'd be getting from our special education department. And next slide. And then again, this is the breakdown. So even if we just looked at our most intensive kids, we're talking 173 kids. You break that down, 65% come back, 35% stay home. It's even smaller. So we're not talking large numbers, or even if we went with the mild, right? If that was the group we targeted. So this helps just give and this is just pure enrollment numbers. So this isn't, they weren't surveyed separately or anything, but this is just to give you a snapshot of what our enrollment looks like. Next slide. And then other groups would be our foster youth. And then next slide. And our homeless. And so, so again, last year, there were 444 homeless students identified. And this year we're at about 324. I can't say why there's that big drop. I'm guessing that it has to do with, not having our kids physically in school so that, so that we can see them. But I can't right now at this second really account for that drop in students. But when we're talking about our homeless students, we're looking at 324 as of right now. And next slide, and I think that might be it. Oh, and then our English language learners. Next slide. And another group, our TK to K. And last slide, I believe that's probably it. So that was just the, thank you so much for the tech department back there. But again, this information is posted. So, we can look at this. It is, this isn't binding, if you put on there that you want to come back, we're not holding people to it. What they have done in other districts, which I've seen has caused, a lot of angst, is that parents have to commit to either, yes, I'm going to do distance learning for the remainder of the year, right? I'm committing to it, or we're coming back. And they need to do that. We would have to do that because of staffing and because of making that commitment to staffing. So that really does just conclude the information that I have. This is just the start. So I just, I really just wanted to start this conversation with the board and give you guys an opportunity to give us some questions and some directions. And I did receive that. So we will start working on some of that. You can clearly email me, or, we can talk about some other areas to look at, but there's no easy solution to this, and there is no right or wrong way to do this. I just think going cautiously and making sure that we have facts and information is really going to work out the best for us. There are districts around the Bay Area that have opened, and we will be keeping a very close eye on them and their success and their challenges. Thank you, President Lawrence.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Ms. Cound, I think a question or comment?
Yeah, so you mentioned that the populations described in this last presentation, that they have not been surveyed specifically, and so there's some estimates that maybe it's the 60-40 kind of split that we're seeing with the general survey. But I wonder if we could really, as a next step, specifically survey.
Can you plug this in for me? Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mute it myself when I was.
No problem, Mr.
I've got an electrical problem, so.
That's okay. Yeah.
But if there was a way to survey, to take like specifically, if you were to look at the special education programs, right, to be able to do this same thing, surveying the parents, students where feasible, and staff and teachers, to figure out how many of them are really wanting to come back, and then how could that be structured? Because like you said, it could be very small groups, so that might be very feasible, and this might be, really reaching some students that need it much more immediately. I was also looking at the employee responses, and how I know you mentioned that one of the groups is not really on email, and so there wasn't much response. I'm assuming that was the Teamsters, which is also our custodians, right? So that would be a group. I really appreciate how you had Anita Johnson presenting here today and really working together with our teachers to figure this out. Perhaps in a future meeting we could have the Teamsters come and, you know, figure out if they have also done a similar survey of their members to figure out, you know, how are our custodians doing right now. They've had a pretty intense go of it so far, and it would become much more so, I think, with the things that we're talking about. So really,
So my plan is to bring all the employee groups in one way or another to have an opportunity to address
fantastic,
the board. So,
fantastic.
yeah.
I appreciate that. That's great. Yeah, and then the students, I really love how you were able to quickly survey the high school students. I am curious of that survey, which schools were represented. I know sometimes when we try to reach out to the schools, we hear more from certain schools than others, and so would want to know if that is actually representative of all of our schools or just a few of them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other board questions or comments?
I have a comment though. That's why I unmuted myself earlier. I realized my power was dying. I had to plug in fast. So, so thank you. So you may have said this and I missed it, but when you listed the other school districts and what they're doing, their dates, for the most part, are they going back with the hybrid model? Do you know, or?
Everyone's going back on the hybrid.
Okay, I just want to. So you just said something else, which was an assumption I had earlier in our conversation today, but then some of the comments made me think, or people are thinking differently, but that many are requiring an either or. Families have to pick, you know, so we're looking at how many, you know, want to stay at home. And so that would be obviously something we would probably be doing as well, is that, you know, that we could still offer for kids or families that want to do complete distance learning. We could do that. We have there's a realistic that we would have the capacity to do that, is what I'm saying, and as well as doing a hybrid plus having a group that's just total distance learning. It's a little mind blowing to me to how logistically you do that, but that's kind of what we're thinking as that scenario, right? And it seems in the realm of possibility.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Just a question on that. I think one thing to consider would be, you know, do we have people opt in or opt out, right? So because there's a certain number of people that just won't respond to the survey. And so do you assume that the ones who don't respond are coming in person, or do you assume that they are going to remain in distance learning? Because whenever you start, you're going to have to put those students somewhere. So I'm not sure which direction would be the best.
One of the districts I'm watching very closely, their default was in person. So if you didn't if you didn't do if you didn't sign the contract, then they automatically put you in person. But the contract comes, that is the last thing that we do. So we would clearly have all the schedules worked out. We'd have whatever the hybrid model was, the times, all of that is all worked out and done and presented in a public meeting. And then the parents have time to then opt in or out. So you deal with all those hanging questions. All those hanging questions get addressed and get dealt with. And then once all that's satisfied, then, okay, parents, who's doing what? You know, what's your choice? Because everyone's always going to say, I need more information. But once you give them all that information, then it's there.
But when you say schedules, I mean, I would think that at a high school master schedule, you really couldn't do it till you knew which.
Well, so what I mean by schedule is first period is going to happen then, this time, and second period is going to happen here, and fourth period is going to happen on this day and time. That's what I mean by schedule, not necessarily, you know, individual master teacher schedules.
Other board questions or comments? All right.
Oh, I do have one more. Sorry,
Okay.
sorry. One more burning question. I know we did the different languages, the English and the Spanish, but I also know in general, kind of, I think nationwide, one of the areas that is struggling the most with distance learning are families that don't speak English. Just, being able to make that connection with the school. And so I would be particularly interested in data around that. How are our families doing that speak languages other than English and Spanish? How many of them are there? How are those students doing, and then what are their preferences also, because that might be different than our other population.
And I guess I would just like to ask what's next now? What's going to happen next? Maybe that's for Dr. Clark and for Mr. Lawrence in terms of the board.
Yes, so we've already done our agenda for Monday's meeting. Hopefully that gets posted. That's going to more than likely. Sorry, we think I
You've
missed
been
the
busy
deadline, but we're going to have that posted tomorrow. But
Okay.
what I will propose is that at every board meeting during my superintendent's report, there's going to be a section on there on reopening, and then we can even formalize it and actually have items where we can start getting formal direction from the board on some of the steps that we need to take. I mean, just some of those initial type steps, like, looking at a schedule, looking at testing, looking at, air filters or safety checks or things like that, if there's information like that, so we can just have a standing item that's going to be involved every meeting so that we can continue to discuss this. And more than likely, we're going to have to call another special meeting in the next, month or two, so that we can continue to be able to talk openly about this without having to do all the other board's business.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, with that then I would thank you to Dr. Clark and staff for the great deal of effort that went into this. Thank you to all the board members for your participation. Thank you to everyone for in the community who's weighed in. And I would just ask, we already have a pandemic going on, and I would just ask as we adjourn the meeting to keep a thought for our neighbors to the north, who in addition to a pandemic are suffering through fires and horrible air quality up in Napa, Sonoma, and anywhere else in California where they're struggling with that. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.